Hello, welcome back to the double swing. It's been a small break, I think. It's been an odd month. When I looked at the schedule, I saw teams skipping Cluj Poker, then I didn't see anything else on the calendar. Not sure what's going on there, but we've ended up in this situation. We've got an event to recap. Also got an overall scoreboard finally up to date. I've got off my ass and actually did it. So, last event, Cluj Poker, I picked the winner in Mouse, got 3 points for that. Yumi, you did have Falcons, who salvaged your event, got you a couple points by making the final. And then our guest had a rough one. Picked FaZe, got a point for that, and not much else going down for them. Not very productive. A shame, but that's all good. Yumi, you currently lead with 10 points overall. Myself and the guests are at 9. The guests helped out by the event where no one was there to pick for them, and they just got 3 points for free. But all right. I don't know how much you caught of that Cluj Poker, Neo, but for me it was a bit of a shocker coming out of it with 3 points from Mouse. You know, honeymoon period and everything, but still, it's an impressive run for them considering how they played so far.
Yeah, I got to give him credit. It actually really annoys my own personal agenda quite a lot because, like, I've already started to see it, and it makes me want to like put my fist on my monitor. People are saying like, "Oh, this is proof that Shuhei's fraudulent." It's like you're an idiot. Like you are thick. Like do not believe this. But I got to give him credit. Honestly, I think they actually played quite well. It also was made even funnier with like Yimfat retweeting porn. That's always going to help. That like
Yeah,
coming into it.
that's a whole arc.
And not even just as well, like, credit to Aguna like himself. He was it was like 2 hours 40 minutes of it. It's like he was in for the movie worth. So
On Twitter,
on
like
Twitter, like come on, man. Like, times can't be that tough.
it's
Like
also it's a time and a place, you know.
yeah, exactly. Like I actually wonder what the story was there. I wonder whether it was just like accidentally a mistake, but then that must still be in his feed. I'll throw my hands up. That's not on my feed, so you know what I mean. Like that, I get football. It's all on my For You page, so that probably has a good insight. But at the same time, good event. Actually, really fun event, I think, as well. In terms of like, obviously with team skipping, I came into a little bit hesitant, being like, oh, this could be, maybe a little slow, or it could actually be not as heavily like storyline innovative, and it could be kind of just boring in that sense. But it was actually quite fun to watch. And I think, something that we sort of touched on just off air there was that credit to PGL on home turf like that includes it was an unbelievable event, and like the crowd was fired up all the way throughout. It looked brilliant. It played out really well. So I think super sick to see CS back in Cluj for the first time in God knows how long, years, and obviously still as ever present. This is something that I've kind of touched on myself on Twitter a little bit, but even when I was out in Romania in like 2023 for ISF, like there's such a rich appetite for Counter-Strike there. They adore it. Any chance to watch any sort of event, even their like local lands they get, big turn-ups come up for them. So I actually think there should generally just be more Counter-Strike events in Romania as a whole. They're always super fired up for it. They have pretty decent arenas. They have, like I said, that appetite for it. You're always going to fill out these stadiums. So super sick event, really cool to see. And I hope it's not the last time we get Romania for this long of a stint where it's like a top level event, especially because you don't even just have to do Cluj. Obviously, you can do Bucharest as well. You can even go into sort of slightly smaller places in Romania like Yash and whatnot, and people are going to turn up and really show out for Counter Strike. So I was a fan.
I think in general we're probably seeing the value in just going to more places that haven't had CS events historically anyway. I think there's a decent appetite for Counter-Strike in general, just kind of across the world. And yeah, maybe some fandoms maybe take it a bit too far, but there I think is a lot of merit to just exploring the world and seeing what we can do with it. So I mean, yeah, maybe Romania does get more events just because, I mean, by virtue of PGL being a Romanian-based company, it actually kind of works out in a lot of ways that we have one of our main tournament organizers that can cater to that.
Yeah, works out nicely for the Romanians. Let's put it that way. There's no PGL
Yeah.
for Bulgaria. Certain markets don't get, fully exploited, I guess, in that sense, fully used. We do have here, though, a pretty different-looking Pro League. It's a bit odd. I didn't realize the play-on lasted so long. I was looking, just out of curiosity, trying to think, how would I schedule this between this and the main event? This is a really long, extensive group Swiss. And so we're going to have a full-on, basically, 2 events just for Pro League. 2 events worth of Counter-Strike. We're just doing the play-in this time. And, a lot of these teams, we have talked about a fair chunk, just because of the nature of VRS, we're seeing a lot of the same sort of ranked teams showing up over and over again. But we do have some new additions. We have a lot of Aussies are saying, usually we only have maybe one Australian team, and sometimes that feels a bit charitable. Now we've got 3, which is huge. We've also got a couple Chinese teams in the mix. There's a lot of interesting teams to talk about. But before we get into that, I do have one question for you.
Are you tired of looking like a chump in game? Sick of opening cases and getting trash skins? Check out Skin Club via my link in the description for a 7% deposit bonus. For gamers 18 or older, Skin Club is a case opening service who run a provably fair opening algorithm to give you truly random outcomes. Skin Club's battles mode has been upgraded, adding new things like crazy, team, and share modes just to make every roll a little more intense and a little more fun. I played a battle or two and managed to win some pretty crazy skins and upgraded a group of them into a gorgeous MP9 hot rod. Perfect for some gold stickers. There is an awards event going on right now, so you can earn event points just by playing on the site. These points can be redeemed for cases, skins, and entries into huge giveaways. Skin Club accept a wide variety of payment methods from cards and PayPal to skins themselves, as well as a range of crypto coins. Remember to play responsibly using the self-care tools provided, and use my link in the description to get a 7% bonus. A big thank you to Skin Club for supporting my channel.
And with that out the way, Neo, we asked you which position you actually wanted to be in, but I don't think we ever got an answer. So now, right on the buzzer, as we go live, where do you want to be in the order? 1, 2, or 3?
I guess so. Last time I was on, I went 3 just to like challenge myself out the gates. Now I've kind of proved my stones a little bit. Now I can go first. I feel like I have no qualms there. So I may as well go first in this case. And I guess so. The way we're doing, we're going to pick favorites first or underdogs first.
And whatever you want, wherever you see the most value.
Okay, I guess I'll probably go favorites first, and I'll go for a nice easy one out the gates, or at least easy in my mind. I feel like Eternal Fire. I feel like it's a simple one to pick, at least for me. I've loved what I've seen from Eternal Fire. I feel like, real Eternal Fire fans remember the minus major, plus major 16 times, right? And it was a rough period for Eternal Fire. But honestly, their run of form for me is felt incredible. And I do think the Jota pickup was just star-studded in itself. This is a guy who was unbelievably good on Sangao, super, super talented. And I felt like he deserved a bit of a step up. Not that Sangao were bad. Like, they were still getting, slight invites here and there and still getting chances. But this is a guy who, at least in terms of his talent, for me, I feel like he should be regularly in kind of tier 1. And I think he's doing a very, very good job. He's not playing the best of roles. Obviously, that is going to happen when you've got players like Centaurus and Wicadia in your team who are so unbelievably good. But even if it's in his slightly harder roles that he's playing, did a very, very good job. I think he's super reliable for me. So I've been a big fan of Eternal Fire. And I think, I even saw one of the cool things actually about this, there's this Pro League event that I'm a big fan of anyway, is that obviously the teams are invited off VRS, but they're not ranked off VRS. They're actually ranked by the other teams, right? And there's a seeding format that was used back at the Krakow Major, and then IM Chicago all the way back. So, it's been a while since it's been used, but I think it's been quite interesting. And ESL released those rankings out, and basically everybody, understandably, put Eternal Fire as number 1, as the scariest team for them in this play-in. And I've got to agree. I think the side looked really, really solid. I think for me, I'm expecting big things. I think the Cluj run was pretty solid. All things considered, the teams they lost to it, when you look at it from a more zoomed out perspective, were Falcons and FaZe, which I think is sort of fair enough. Falcons actually look really good at this tournament. FaZe as well looked, better. And I think, for me at least, I can understand those losses. And it was like, they weren't, dominant as well. 2-1 losses, so you can take them. At the flip side, the wins weren't exactly fantastic either. Imperial Valkyries, very, very easy one for them. Big was pretty simple too. Squeezed a little bit past 3D Max, but as a whole, when you put them against kind of the rest of the crop here, I would be so surprised if they don't actually go just 3-0 through the Swiss, right? It's starting off with Mind Freak as well, and no offense to Mind Freak, if Mind Freak get more than like 8 rounds across the series, I'd be baffled. So that's the way I'm looking at it. I think Eternal Fire should be a lock, at least in my eyes, to go 3-0.
Yeah, look, we have been quite excited about watching Eternal Fire play, but
I think that's fair.
We have seen the rough with the smooth sometimes with Eternal Fire. Is this just a case of this real event not being stacked enough for that rough side of them to come out? How do you see it?
I absolutely see this. So by the way, I don't think there's like really any competition bar pain, if I'm being honest. So like, if
yeah,
it was the
listen.
main event, then we can start to debate here. But surely there shouldn't be that much.
To be honest, the Cluj results did shake me a little bit in terms of my confidence with Eternal Fire, because some of the words that were coming out from Major after the fact were, oh, well, you know, we're on the road. You know, they're overloading their calendar at the start of this year. They're attending basically every event that they're getting invited to. And so they are going to spend a lot of time away from their families and a lot of time away from home. And, you know, in a sense, they were sort of alluding to the idea that they were homesick. And listen, I think this has been said by other pundits in the space as well, that, you know, you guys have only just gotten to like the top of Counter-Strike to a certain degree. You're just now scraping at tier 1, and now we're already complaining. Like, you've volunteered yourself to go to all of these events, and so for me, I do worry that there's maybe a lack of I guess, focus or drive when they are continuing to be on the road again for not only the play-ins, and I guess they plan, obviously, to make it to the main part of ESL Pro League as well. I think, I mean, I don't doubt that these guys are a very firm sort of first pick material team, but I think I need to see them come in with, you know, good mindset into the tournament for me to have full confidence in them, because I do agree their run so far this year has been impressive. The Jota integration has looked better than I expected, and this team actually has not only like cool strategies, but also are like super explosive. So they've kind of got a nice bag of tricks that they can dive into. They just, yeah, the wording behind some of the ways in which they've been approaching these tournaments, and I guess all that time on the road, has me worried that they're not fully locked in, I suppose.
Yeah, that's a weird one. I do remember seeing the reaction. Basically, we've got... Sometimes we do give empathy to teams for players, and then when Eternal Fire bring it up, everyone's like, yeah, nah, shut up. Basically, no, screw you. We don't care. You don't get to have this problem. And I think for them, it's more of a question of they've been competing for so long from home. They haven't really even had any exposure to this with any consistency. So I guess for them, it has been difficult, but I don't really buy it as the reason their Counter-Strike sometimes suffers. I see it more of just a problem in terms of how they approach the game overall, a lack of strategic depth, a lack of voices, you know, things to adjust with. Like, rather when the initial plan starts just getting completely, not necessarily countered, but challenged. As soon as it's a bit of difficulty for them, not winning those opening fights, not finding all the space on their lurks, they get kind of locked into something they don't want to be in. But no, they are still a very dangerous team. And look, who's going to go toe-to-toe with this roster at this event? I'm not even thinking about Pain, really. Like, I just don't think they have individuals deep enough, like, throughout their squad to really go toe-to-toe. I mean, I've got some love for some of these individuals in these teams, but nah. It's a solid pick. They should be steamrolling straight through. We'll see if they actually do. You'll never know. You never know. There are some little hiccups you could have here and there with 3D Maxes, the heroics. You know, maybe they have to face LynnVision on a couple weird maps, but yeah, they should be doing good.
Call me Sue Masterclass inbound.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Westmelon's back too.
Yeah, you never know. Yumi, do you want second or third pick?
Yeah, this is a weird situation where we've not discussed any of our picking orders, so I'm actually going to let you choose, because I think I've had choice the last couple episodes.
Oh, okay. Damn. I do feel like the one big favorite has been taken, and I feel like I'm hearing something like a weird echo in my room. I am, and I'm not sure where that's coming from. Like, there's this weird, like, high-pitched note. As soon as I start talking, it starts to just reverberating around. I have no idea what it is.
We're having a full-on schizo episode.
You not see the guy, like, right there, playing the flute?
I literally saw that half that sentence as well. I don't know what even hit. Something on my headphones and I turned them off. So that was great. I just came back being like, I'm hearing noises. What the fuck am I missing in the last 10 seconds?
It's just a bit of possession. Don't worry. I am going to go with the team I'm the most personally invested in. Then I'm going to go with Heroic, the team who've been my roller coaster so far this year. I've got something of a. I'm a bit invested. Let's just put it that way. I'm just a bit invested.
Cool.
Between the announcement of the roster, the drama, the bollocks basically that happened that ends up with this exact iteration. I still thought they had a lot of potential. Tanir as a player is, well, he was stylistically exactly what they wanted from Nilo, but instead of min-maxing for brain power. He's min-maxed for aim. Was kind of my assessment between the two. He was a slightly more aim-heavy player who played a very similar style. And they've had one dreadful series all year. Otherwise, they've lost to legit teams. They've lost to Eternal Fire once. They've lost to Spirit once. But they had one true calamity in their big loss that just threw a downer on them. I think a lot of people immediately at that point just like, okay, never mind. They were fraudulent. They were fake. They were nonsense. But this was something that happened last year when the core of this team were Sangal. They had that massive just collapse at the RMR. It felt like it was out of nowhere. Only Jota really left standing at the end of it in terms of having an acceptable performance. That was essentially that big series. And since then, they've come back. They've come and qualified for Dallas. They looked really strong in their last 3 series at that event. I mean, beat big, beat Astralis. I mean, Astralis were probably a bit distracted, but still had to be done. I am really loving what they're doing in terms of not only their roster construction, but the way they're playing, the way they're calling. SAW has just... I heard rumors from players that, like, SAW's going to really, like, improve us, like, blah, blah, blah. I was like, all right, yeah, sure, cool. Go play Counter-Strike. And then they were kind of right. I'm going to be honest. They have looked a little bit stronger, a little bit sharper. It does help they've added some Pious and Sneer to the Sangal mix, but all in all, they're a team that's going to show us, I think, like a top 10 level year-round. It's just a question of not having too many of those blow-up moments where they just magically go from being fun, explosive, like really dynamic to just complete trash from out of nowhere. We need to avoid those, or at least have them at the right moments. And I think people will realize they're legit one of the 10 best teams in the world right now.
Oh, sorry. I wasn't sure if you wanted to jump in or not.
No, you go first.
So Heroic, God, they're such a weird team because I see what you're seeing in that, you know, SAW's kind of leveled up their macro decision making. The riflers seem like they're set up properly. I wasn't expecting some Pious to just be like a slightly better Samey. Like I wanted some Pious to actually show us the level that we've seen him sort of reach the heights of, you know, aggressive AWPing. Even if it's within the system, you know, he's just going to be holding an angle, actually hitting his shot. I've seen way too many misses from some Pious on this roster for me to be really that comfortable. I don't think it's going to take long for him to start being active, but for now, I mean, I'm sort of missing out on that extra sort of star power X factor on this Heroic squad. I think the riflers are looking better. I think Youngster, Tanir, hell, even X-Flout as well can have these rounds, especially in sort of closing moments. I think, weirdly, this Heroic team are all very clutch, and I think that was something that they carried over from Sangal, where, you know, it didn't matter who was in the 2v2 or the 1v2. They all had very much, like, the same confidence that everyone could play that situation right. And Sampaius is definitely still a clutch player for this team. I just think, unfortunately, like his start of rounds, his mid rounds, he misses a lot of shots on like site executes where I am expecting him to get one and get traded or one and fall back. And I just don't see that anymore. It's like he misses and then overcommits and dies. And right now it just feels like he's a shell of his former self. And it's weird because I think when I saw him relinked with SAW, I thought, well, this is going to make it so that Sampaius doesn't look as bad as he was on the Falcons, for example. In fact, he was one of the few shining lights on the Falcons when he had his removal. And somehow he is still a shell. So I just want him to get back out of that and, you know, regain some confidence. He had a very good series against Astralis in an online official for the Dallas qualifiers. It's what gets Heroic into Dallas, which is very cool. But it's, you know, that I don't know if I should just see that as like a weird red herring because Astralis suddenly were much better after that online official when they played at Cluj. So the Heroic are a weird roster because I think they do have potential. They are clearly growing. I just don't think they're growing at the rate that I really hoped this roster would with the sort of star signings they made.
Yeah, I agree. I actually do like this Heroic pick though. I mean, for me, they're definitely one of the higher up the kind of pecking order teams that I would have picked as well. I think kind of one of the things that I've really liked about Heroic is actually how much Exod has stepped up comparatively to this core in Sangal. I thought, you know, in Sangal it wasn't bad, but it was actually the Jota show quite a lot. And I think Exod's taken a lot more space. He's doing really, really well. I think the real interesting conversation around Heroic is that sort of what is their future looking like? Because Tanir was, you know, initially only brought in as a, sort of a temporary stand-in type vibe because Nilo accepted sign the contract, but then said like, I'm not going to play just yet for personal reasons, and he was wanting to come in after the first few tournaments. But then you've now got Tanair playing his roles, who is without a doubt the shining star of this team, right? He's so good Tanair. He's been unbelievably crisp, so confident, so fun to watch. I think has given Heroic a lot to like. So I think they're in a really awkward spot where part of them's thinking like, do we actually even need Ne0 now? Like, and if I'm them, I'm definitely not picking Ne0 over Tanair, not at the moment. So this lineup's in a bit of a weird spot in the sense of I always just wonder, what's going to happen with Ne0, if anything, or if like maybe like, Youngster doesn't play to the level that they want, even though he actually has been quite good recently. But, if he doesn't play to their level, do they then try and change Ne0's roles and put him in Youngster's positions or something like that? But it's a really awkward kind of spot that he's in. But as a whole, this Heroic team, I've been a fan of them. I again, another team that I think shouldn't break that much of a sweat, maybe pick up like a loss here or there as they often do, like kind of by accident to like a, like a 3D max or something like that. But for the most part, I expect them to make it through. And I've been a fan of them, right? I think, like I mentioned, Exiled has been the one for me who I've been super impressed with just how he's been stepping up much more often, much more consistent than he was in towards Sangao. And I think, when you step up from kind of being a tier 1.5, like a fringe side like that, to being in the thick of it in the tier 1 and you're doing as well as they are, I'm a fan. I casted that Heroic Astralis game too for the FIAM Dow course, and it was just an absolute massacre. One of the quickest games I've casted easily all year and for a while, and they look so good. And it did make you question sort of what went wrong, because literally the day after Astralis beat Mongols and they did that, and then they made their run, and you're thinking, what went wrong in like, the online match? I think maybe comes down to comfort, I think, a little bit, obviously playing on kind of setups that they're not really used to, and maybe they were just like a bad day for them or whatever, unprepped. And credit to Heroic, they came in towards that game super well prepped, and I think that's one of the things that they've got going for them quite a while there. They've got a very good support staff. Obviously Sora is fantastic. Their preparation going in towards like, if I just use that Astralis map or match as an example, like they counter-stratted the shit out of them because they hadn't played in like 9 days. They had all this time to prep for them, and everything was red. Every pistol round, they knew exactly what they were going to do. They countered it. A lot of their first gun rounds as well, they knew what their general default was going to look like, and they were able to shut down really, really easily. So I'm hoping they can come in towards this tournament and do, sort of the same sort of thing, right? Come in towards it, start well. They're very good at prep. Obviously, it's a little bit harder to prep for Saw considering the changes they've made, but at the same time, Saw a dog shit, so that shouldn't be that hard. They should make that one look pretty comfy. So again, Heroic aside for me, that at worst case scenario, like 3-1, making it through, right? That's where I sort of see them at the moment. But if they were to go 3-0, it generally actually wouldn't surprise me that much.
Yeah, tough to see until the very last game, I don't see the hard matchup for them, really. The new Saw, I mean, we might get into the new Saw later, either as someone picks them or as a bonus team. We don't know. We don't know.
I gotta say though, with like this tournament as a whole, it's actually quite difficult to like debate comparisons like some of the others like Cluj or Blast Bounty, just because of how like lopsided the tournament is in a way, right? It's so top heavy, where like there's such a big disparity between like the top 4 or 5 teams and like the bottom 4 or 5 teams. Like they're in completely different leagues, so it makes it so difficult to be like, oh, I don't know here, because it's like, will Pain or an Eternal Fire or an Heroic, will they lose to house bets? Hell no. Like,
no.
Like it's not going to happen, right? So it makes it like, it's not even like a debate, where at least like when we go to Cluj and we could talk about like some of those quote unquote like lower end teams, you'd be like, oh, maybe, there might be a world here, but this one feels so different.
Yeah, it kind of does. But look, you've got back-to-back picks here. Who are you going to take?
I'm going to lead with a favorite, and I'm just going to pick a team that you've been picking quite a lot, actually, and I'm going to opt for 3D Max. This team has captured me in a way that I didn't expect to appreciate them. I think they've kind of been hovering around the same level and plateaued for a decent amount of time now, probably like the past year and a half. I'd say they kind of stagnated. But now with the addition of Body, they seem to have a bit more flair to them. One that they have sort of better management of mid rounds, I think is looking a lot cooler. They're also probably the only team that I see right now in the top 30 that are actually implementing gimmicks in a way that is uniquely them. Like they're calling weird head stacks over smokes in positions that most teams aren't exploring. They're going for nade stacks off of anti-strat information. I think this is a team that is clearly putting in a lot of effort to level up their game as fast as possible, and they've done so by adding someone that has a lot of rapport, a lot of history, and shoots very well as well. So 3D Max are my pick as favorites, just because I think they're probably the one that I see forecasted to see improvement the fastest, given that the roster move was so recent for Cluj, and then I just think that they play a good enough style that, you know, they can just, I think, punch up in a way that most teams maybe don't expect them.
Okay, I'm happy to sort of follow here, since 3D Max is kind of you guys as sort of you like them a lot. I've actually been a bit of a hater for 3D Max, and for the most part enjoying the hate watch a little bit.
Sure.
And it comes down to them, I think, actually, in my eyes, I think being rated, I think, a little bit higher than they actually are. I still see 3D Max as a pretty meh team for the most part. And one of the ways in sort of previous years without the sort of VRS ranking to go about this will be to just play a little bit more online Counter-Strike, just to get, you know, your comfort out there and get a lot of reps under your belt, and then go to LAN and prove yourself. The only unfortunate thing is that it just makes zero sense for them to play online officials at the moment. With their VRS ranking being like inside of the top 15, there's just no way you're going to be kind of risking it, picking up, like, you know, like an upset loss to like a bait or something like that, which could potentially kind of spiral you down those rankings. So if this was previous years, I'd like to see them playing some more online Counter-Strike in any sort of sense, but it obviously doesn't make sense for them to at the moment. But when I look back to Cluj, some of the losses make sense, right? You're talking about Mouse, fair enough. Eventual winners, you can give them credit there. Eternal Fire, again, I think that's probably an expected loss. When the SAW one was pretty bad, right? That's like the real red herring of the results. I know we can talk about it being an overtime on Dust 2, but like, you know, it's not a good series to be losing to. You're losing to a dead team. Like, you know, it's simple as that. Two of them are leaving after this tournament, and one of the guys who was leaving in terms of Sure was the best player in the server, right? So it's just like, it's sort of brutal to watch in a way, and that loss in particular again really continues to like sow the seeds of doubt in my mind. But then, you know, for the most part, if you actually look at 2025, it's been a pretty good year, right? You know, they've been picking up some decent wins, beating teams they should be beating, right? You know, we've got the I am Dow qual, always should happen for them. Great work, wins over Heroic and Nevermore. That's super good to see. The losses before that, Kato, you know, lost to Vitality, again, sort of kind of like fair enough in a way. Lost to Eternal Fire, again, sort of fair enough, right? I feel like they're just a better team right now. So it's hard, right? I feel like maybe 3D Max, I mean, maybe kind of as I'm talking, I'm convincing myself that they are actually just in the right spot where they lose to teams they should be losing to at Barsaw, and then they're beating the teams that they're expected to be, like your bigs, for example, right? But I don't know, 3D Max never convinced me. I don't know how much, like, I don't love or hate the body move. It feels quite lateral. I think he may bring a little bit more freedom to people like Maka, for example, which I think actually could really help. Maka, obviously, being for me the most exciting player to watch in this team. I think Gravity actually quite consistently gets quite underrated, plays quite bad roles, but I think actually does really, really well. And also, as we saw when they played against Vitality, you know, he's not shy, right? Which is what you want to see from a youngster. So there's bits to like about this team, but at the same time, and this is sort of the thing I have with a lot of national teams, is that you just, like, in my mind, think like, if you could just pick up a couple of international players, you can make your team like twice as good. But it makes sense why obviously they stick towards the French region. There's just so little talent there. Basically, outside of this team and outside of the guys on Vitality, the only player that could even be considered as Ne0kai, really. And Ne0kai's obviously, you know, relatively early into his contract with Ent, so he's kind of untouchable there. So I don't really know what they can do. It feels like the only issue is they just got to try and coast with this ranking for as long as possible. I think they should make it through. Again, this just comes down to how sort of lopsided this event is. But they don't always convince me in terms of making deep runs. They don't ever feel like a team that I bank to make a deep run.
But all they have to do is beat all these noobs beneath them. So
True, right? And they don't struggle normally against teams like that are ranked lesser than them. They're pretty good at being the overdog and playing like the overdog. It's just the fact that I think maybe for them, you want to, like, I find it hard to justify them as like a tier 1 lock-in team when they can't beat tier 1 teams, right? That's sort of how I put it. They can't even, like, they contest in some cases, sure, but it's like, anytime they go against any of these like top 10 teams, you know, you maybe have some of these other fringe teams in some sort of similar positions, top 15, who I feel like, okay, you guys could probably actually pick up like, you know, a quote unquote upset win here in some regards, but I don't see that being the case for them. Even teams like around them, like your, I don't know, your GamerLegions, for example, or like your VPs, I'd be like, okay, I can see you maybe like, you know, scalping a series off like I don't know, like a Mongols or an Astralis or whatever. But for 3D Max, it just never feels like they can do it.
I think my final point on them is just going to be that, like, from what I've seen, the early days with Body is that Exorcist and Gravity actually are, I guess, developing further as, I guess, intuitive riflers. I think they seem to have a bit more freedom. I think they're giving more opportunities for them to find openers, and I guess we get better skill expression from these players, where before it felt like 3D Max, to be honest, I felt like a lot of their wins were actually kind of fueled off of just Maka popping off or winning clutches, and in a way that was kind of unsustainable for the roster. And yeah, they wouldn't lose to lower level teams, but if they ever were going to try and cause an upset or pull a map close, it was usually just because Maka was having a good game and everyone else was just kind of mid as fuck. So I like that they have Body and that these other pieces are able to express themselves a little bit better in a way that is nice. And that's neglecting Lucky, who is also just like can just carry games as well. It's between Maka and Lucky to carry games usually.
Yeah, Lucky's always a bit of a shock, isn't it? Anyone who's familiar with his career historically, seeing Lucky dominate a series always feels a bit off, but on 3D Max it seems to work a lot more than it should. And yeah, that one SAW loss is the only loss really I think they've had this year they should be condemned for. Like, you know, if you are going to be a hater, hate watching, yeah, that's the one series you kind of like, yo, you lost to Sure. Like, no offense, but not only is it SAW, he's one of the players they're kicking, and they're kicking him because he's been pretty bad.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure how he's managed to go and dumpster you, but look, they have wins over VP, MIBR, FlyQuest. I mean, they have multiple wins over MIBR, but they've just not been very good. Speaking of teams that are overrated, MIBR don't feel like they're going to be in the favorite section for very long. But no, this is one of those events where I was gonna bring this up, where we are talking about teams like 3D Max a lot. We're seeing them play a lot, and that's basically because the new VRS system with the like invites that are going out has melded Tier 1.5 just permanently onto the back end of Tier 1. Like, we're going to see them just there. All these events are going to have bigger number of teams attending. We're going to see a lot more of this kind of level of roster. And I'm okay with that. I think it's been historically a problem that we've never had real opportunities for them to prove themselves. You know, Na'Vi gets to miss playoffs at big events 5 times a year, but we still have to watch them the other 7 events. No one else gets that number of reps. So I'm okay with it. I do think that eventually some of the teams are going to be exposed to being, you know, probably just a little too fluky, a little too fraudulent to consistently be at these events. 3D Max, there's a chance they're amongst them, but I agree, under the Body, after the Body change, because he's not leading, there's a certain amount of their play that I respect. I like the fact that getting rid of Joko opens up Gravity a lot more. Exercise has always had this sort of sharp aim, at least so I've been told. I always struggled to see it, but it's poked through a few times. So no, I like this 3D Max team, and not just because they're French. It is also because they are sometimes quite fun to watch in the way they play. So hopefully they can make it through. I do want to see them play in the main event. They're just, for me, one of those teams where I'm like, there's this. If I had to have that like instinct, that spidey sense of like they could be that fraudulent team I like, yeah, 3D Max are amongst them. But hey, we'll see. We'll see what we'll see. Yumi, you got another pick? Are you going to lock out your favorites for the event?
No, I really want to move for an underdog, and there is one that is calling to me, but it's gonna be a bit harsh if I go for them, and I just don't know if I know enough about this other team to talk about them, because listen. I mean, I'm basically debating between FlyQuest and LynnVision, and I've not watched enough LynnVision to know. I mean, I've seen things, and I've watched a couple of games, and I have been impressed, but I feel like I've not observed for weaknesses. So I can in good conscience pick them. I'm going to stick with FlyQuest, and the reason I said this was going to be harsh is that, to be honest, this will be the last time I probably pick them. I do think they need to see improvements. This is a team that does seem to have leveled up in, I guess, on a sort of median level between, you know, Vexite, Liaz, I think they both look a little bit more impressive now that they have Regali as like a more stable set of hands. And that's only being, I'm being fairly generous there. Regali, I think, is still showing signs of wear and tear and rust. And as much as Vexai and Liaz are improving, Inns is currently in the biggest slump I've ever seen him in his career. Which is strange to say because he was actually just so consistent during all the turbulence of Alistair's inconsistent and, the disappointments that this core seemed to have for such a long period of time. I don't know what's happened to Inns, and I don't know if that, Alistair was secretly the Inns whisperer the whole time, which is a weird monkey's paw to have. Like, you either have a very good rifler or you have a very good, or you have a better author, and you can't have one without the other. So this is me maybe picking them for the last time because I've seen it too many times now where FlyQuest, and this is not just a player-dependent thing, the leadership or the team just seems to shut down when they have a good opening map in a series. They will either win a map or play it very close and feel very confident, and then suddenly in map 2 it's like, oh, we used all our energy in map 1, guys. It's all over now. I hate that about them, and I always wish that they had, I guess, either a better mental coach or something in their back end staff. And I'm sure they've tried to address this issue before, but first off, I'm not even an Aussie, but I can understand the pain that the Aussies feel having to watch this core be the best from their region crumble so many opportunities where they genuinely do look like the better team in a number of games that they enter the server, and it just falls apart so rapidly. So I think there are bright sparks for FlyQuest. There's definitely concerns, but I think if they don't succeed or, make it into the main part of ESL Pro League at a minimum, then I think they should very seriously consider either changing Urcast or getting somebody on the analytics or mental coach side to step in more substantially with this roster. Hell, maybe even the question of shifting leadership, because I know that if Dexter doesn't have a good game individually, his calling actually suffers quite substantially as well. So I have quite a few gripes, but they are still a strong enough unit for me to think that they should make it out of the play-ins.
I'd probably have to agree here. I think for FlyQuest, they've got the ability, if you kind of consider like the difference between ranking and favorites or whatever, like, people like Soars and your MRBRs, I can see FlyQuest picking up wins there for me. But I do have to agree. I want to give them the benefit of the doubt and just say like teething issues early days because of, introducing a new Orpa who plays quite differently to Alistair. But yeah, I think you're right. They've always been so reliant on Inns doing well, and now that Inns is starting to struggle, right, in terms of individual performances, you have to put a lot more reliance on people like, Liaz and Vexai, right? And sure, Vexai in particular, I think actually sees these really pop-off moments. Liaz too, but I think a bit more infrequently. Inns has always been the star. You always needed him to go nuclear, and if he doesn't, FlyQuest do struggle. And of course, now we're getting to this period where if he can't rekindle his form, something's got to give. So yeah, I feel like for FlyQuest, they've done step one of like changing a player, and I think for me, I'll always say the change was the right change, right? Yeah. I feel like I've always really highly rated Regali. I think he's a very talented player. I think he's got so much to offer, and I think some of his previous teams are just not his fault, right? Teams shutting down. Like, what can you really do? I think in terms of his individual ability, he's looked really solid in the past, and I've always been a fan of him, and I've always felt like he can play up against sort of these top ends, and he's not done bad since he's come in towards the team. I still want more from him, in all fairness, but he's not done awfully, right? And I think coming in towards a new team, that's going to happen. Obviously, they're in a bit of a different world as well for FlyQuest, so they don't scrim at all, right? There's no pracs that they play, bar when they come to a tournament to boot camp. But in like the quote unquote off periods, all they do is server work. And I think that's always going to take a bit of a hit, right? There's only so much server work you can do before heading in towards a tournament. So I'm giving them a bit of time, right? I feel like because basically they're only doing pracs and scrims properly when they're at tournaments for, the few days before, maybe a few during and potentially a couple afterwards before they fly home, right? It doesn't give you a lot of time to really gel in terms of the synergy and cohesion of a team. So I think that's going to come just through official practice in a way. But as underdogs go in this tournament, I think they're in a pretty good spot. Like even their opening game, right, as well against M80, with M80 having some shaky moments too, that one actually could be very difficult. A bit of a coin flip in a way to predict, but I would probably actually lean FlyQuest if we can get ins online, and that's going to be a priority for them. So yeah, step one of changing a player, I think, done. I think Yumi, you're actually spot on, right? Like if things aren't going well, you actually do have to look towards the coaching department and the support staff. And from my understanding, there isn't really a hell of a lot of support staff at FlyQuest. They're pretty kind of minimalistic org in a way, being as small as they are from the region that they are. But, you know, with this Urcast introduction towards this team, we need to see him prove why, right? We need to see a bit of tactical depth added to this team. They can't be just relying on one rifler getting like a 1.2 rating or more a game for things to go well. They've got to have some depth. They've got to be able to get these other riflers on board. And obviously the results just haven't gone well. You look at kind of like this year as a whole, like they've picked up, you know, in the entirety of the year, they picked up one win, which is against MIBR, which as we know means very, very little. And then it's just been nothing but losses since, right? You know, Blast Bounty, dead last, Kato, dead last, or Kato Players, dead last, Cluj, dead last as well. So, you know, there's just nothing really been on offer for us. And there's probably a bit of a clock ticking. They're in a nice spot, which is like, because of their region, they're never really going to struggle to qualify to stuff, right? Which I guess is a bit of weight off your shoulders. But there is a world in which things could start to get a little janky if they keep just tumbling down. Some of these Chinese teams are going to start to pick up wins domestically, which is going to push them up the VRS ranking. And then pressure is actually on the shoulders, right? If they ever get to a point, especially, you know, if they leave things too late, you want them to like proactively make changes and choices, right? But if they get to a point where they, you know, within a few rankings of Chinese teams maybe taking their spots as guaranteed invites to events, that's where, you know, all the walls could crumble for FlyQuest. And that's like the real worst case scenario. So they need to get ahead of it, right? And I feel like, especially if they come in towards Pro League, this play-in, and don't make it in towards the next stage, something's got to give. Something's got to move or change in some way.
That and the fact that they don't play in domestic leagues.
Exactly.
So, you know, they have no sort of rebound back it up the world rankings against quote unquote easier teams from the region, you know.
Yeah.
Even that, I mean, there's that timeline, and then, you know, what's happened with Talon and MHL is that MHL is now no longer with the roster. They're back to playing full Aussies, and that's because they probably were thinking like, oh, well, MHL's not in Australia all the time, and so it's more I guess more worth our while to actually scrim with somebody locally, and then we can play, you know?
Yeah,
we've got a problem here. Yumi, I think, are we finding your new Virtus Pro here? Is that what we're doing?
No, this is why I'm saying this will be the last time.
You'll say that. You said that a few times with Virtus Pro in the past. Because...
No, I didn't. I just said I kept getting burned by them. I never said I wouldn't keep picking them.
Okay. Maybe you weren't as directly... rejecting them, but still,
it's why it was an abusive relationship.
We'll see, because I checked. I was like, he has picked them twice. Neither time has got him any points. I checked their results for the year. Yeah, 1 win and then 6 straight series losses, most of which 2-0. I think 4 2-0s, 2 2-1s, or something like that. It's been rough, and as much as I am also on the Regali hype train, you can only do so much. And I'm sorry, if it completely throws you off your game having an AWPer who's not shit, then we've got a different problem to address. If that's a real problem for you, yeah, we need to have a chat, because it's been an ugly showing. And I get it, 3D Max also lost to SAW, but I still can't get past that loss. I can't get past any of the other losses on top of it. It's been too ugly for me to really believe in them. And I look at this list, and you said you almost picked LynnVision. I'm like, not only would I have picked LynnVision, I think there's a lot of teams that I haven't seen terrible things from that I would have picked over them. You know what I mean? There's a lot of teams here where I'm like, technically, I'd rather have no history of their dirt than all the dirt I have on FlyQuest right now. Like, I'd rather just be like, delude myself. Like, we haven't seen them against this tier of competition. They've been so good domestically. Why can't Mind Freak do it? You know? Ricky's the old veteran leader.
But also might not be back as well. Like, I've been hearing rumors about him, like, also being a sub too. So I don't even know what's going on there. I think he is playing though, but who knows? I guess, is it my turn now to go again?
No, it's back to me actually.
Okay.
Yeah, I've got another pick.
Yes, it goes. Okay,
yes, snake,
I get it now. Yeah.
And I want to lock out my favorites. So I'm just going to get, before I have to try and justify picking a Brazilian team or any of the Portuguese speaking teams who are remaining in the favorite section. I'm going to take GamerLegion.
Mm-hmm.
I've paired up my 2 NIP Academy reject IGLs who just weren't good enough for the mighty Ninjas in Pajamas, and instead are now above them in the rankings as IGLs. I do love that. ZTR, IGL for the team, but honestly, it's GamerLegion. We always end up talking about Ash, don't we? And I'm going to try to avoid it. But it's hard. He signed Rez and did the impossible. He got multiple good series out of Rez, back to back, which is just mind-blowing, to be honest. It's insane. And look, they've played really strong CS the entire year. Katowice wins over Mouse and Astralis. I mean, the Mouse part, people aren't going to be too impressed at that point. But still, strong victories. Took a map off Spirit. They've just generally looked good. And a part of it is the calling, is the strats, is the ideas. But another part of it is how much they've gotten out of their riflers. They signed PR, who's... I mean, he was a prospect a while ago. No one watched the video, and I was like, that's cool, we'll see. We'll just watch him grow and develop, and finally at some point in this, he'll make an appearance into the scene. I thought it'd take longer, though. I didn't think Mao's NXT would be rebuilt in the way it was. He'd be available, and GamerLegion made a very astute signing in picking him up, because, man, he's so crisp and so clean. Still incredibly young. And the Rez signing, I had my doubts, obviously. Everyone said, your time on NIP doesn't count. I kept pointing out, but he was there the entire time. Like, everyone else's terrible period, their down year, their weak months, everything they had problematically. Rez is just there in the background, like, just pretending it's all fine. Consistently mid, and consistently not, raging against the NIP machine. So it was a bit suspect to me. Like, maybe he is the toxic problem somehow. Like, maybe he's too nice. I don't know. But he's come in here. He's played very well. We still haven't seen, I think, the top of what's like possible from Slend, but it hasn't really been that big of an issue. We are in the rifler meta. They do have some really strong rifle play. Even if Towson does get a bit maligned, I do think he's just solid. Like, for me, that's what matters. He doesn't make a lot of stupid plays, and I kind of respect that. Even if he isn't the sharpest, he doesn't need to be the sharpest. They do have 2 currently very sharp-looking riflers in PR and Rez, so that's all good for me. I'm happy to pick them here. They're going to have strat books on strat books, anti-strats on anti-strats. They open up with NRG, which is an interesting matchup I'm sure we're going to get into eventually when we talk about underdogs, because they're a very odd team to think about right now, given their import, the changes they've made, but I still think GamerLegion should have their number in the opening matchup, just off firepower, let alone having the better strat book, the better system, the better structure. No, GamerLegion, they're the 3rd seed at this event, at least by our standings. We're using HLTV ranking. I'm not sure where the teams have placed them. I didn't go through that full list. But they are a legit team who play good Counter-Strike. Plus, they do have a good number of fraggers. So I think they're a solid pick. And I think more consistent than some of the other options I had left available.
I have no qualms with GamerLegion. In Ash I trust, I think, is sort of my mantra for a lot of time. I think he is consistently proving himself as one of the best just out-and-out coaches with a much more limited budget compared to a lot of others as well. He's just so consistent, the talent he picks up. And I gotta say as well, even when he picked up Torsen, I was really actually hesitant about Torsen. I did not rate him at all in the tier 2, and he's made him actually into quite a solid player in his own regards. ZTR is calling very, very well too. So yeah, your time on NIP doesn't count, continues to be proved really right, but this team are just really fun to watch, right? I think you touched on a good point about just getting a little bit more out of Slend, but it also helps in a way when you don't need to as well, because PR and Rez find their form, Torsen steps up too, and they have such a good rifling core around a solid IGL who can also step up in the numbers department occasionally. I like this team a lot. I think they're fun to watch. I think they really are good at punching up against opponents too, which is always fun to see. Like, they put up good matches against, teams that are kind of, tougher to put away, right? I mean, even taking a map off Spirit, I think was really, really commendable in that sense. Wins against kind of Astralis and Maus at IM Kata, right? These are good runs for this side. So, for me, I always see sort of GamerLegion, especially at the moment, as like a fringe playoff team. Like, they can maybe just make it to playoffs and not go that much further. But I think actually for them, in their current position that they're in, we've got two guys who've come in within the last month. I don't think that's bad really at all. So I'm a fan of GamerLegion a lot. I have no qualms with them. Again, this is sort of a competition for them, which I feel like they shouldn't really struggle that much. They've been playing some good Counter-Strike. They seem like they prep very, very well for especially opponents that would get overlooked quite a lot too. Teams that would be considered pretty easy wins. They don't really kind of take it for granted, right? They do a lot of work coming into it. So for them, they're another side who, like, if they were to go like 3-1, I 3-1, even if they were to kind of squeeze out 3-0, I'd be like, yeah, sick. That's GamerLegion through and through. And it's then actually into the later stage, into kind of the next iteration, the stage 2 of Pro League, as they're kind of calling it, where you come against some of those big hitters, where again, like, you could see them pretty, not that surprisingly pick up wins against teams like, your Liquids of the world, your G2s of the world, and be like, this is a team who can actually punch up against decent opponents. So I'm a fan of GamerLegion. I think they don't really struggle that much with teams that are lesser than them. And they're able to make series competitive against teams that they, on paper, should have no chance against. So I'm a big fan of GamerLegion. For me, I agree. They were going to be my other pick as well, coming in as my favorite. So I got to wholeheartedly agree there. I don't really see any downsides to them at the moment. Pretty early in, 2 players in within the last sort of month or so, and looking very solid.
Yeah, I don't think there's much that we haven't said about GamerLegion before that we can say again here. So I'm going to focus more on just an angle that I hadn't really thought about much previously. Is because I've always had GamerLegion down as like a very anti-strat based team, someone that creates a game plan specifically for their opponent in a way that most other teams sort of that had been hovering inside of the tier 2 just didn't. They might have identified like one weakness, but there was no sort of consistent game plan. And it makes them actually a very hard team to anti-strat in a lot of ways, because a lot of the demos you're watching will be different. Like the trends are not likely to be carried over, except on maps like maybe Inferno, but that's still their best map in their pool. So, if you're going to look at tendencies, that would be the map that you would think GamerLegion would get exposed the most on against, top level teams. But they are pretty consistent at actually being able to address that, or coming up with a unique game plan that slightly alters the way that they start on those CT sides, that is actually exploiting weaknesses in I guess the T side defaults. So yeah, they're a fun team to watch in that you don't really know what you're going to get out of GamerLegion every game, but you know that they're going to put up a fight in a way that you maybe don't expect them to, because I actually don't know that I trust this rifling core to the same degree. I don't actually think they have a very strong rifling core, but I think what has always been very alluring about GamerLegion is that they are almost always better than the sum of their parts. Like they always seem to punch up. They always have a unique angle to come into the game with, and to be honest, they end up just winning very high impact rounds when they actually need it a lot in these series. Whether it's a good call from either Ash or ZTR, or whether sometimes you just get like a clutch out of Slend or PR, like getting a double entry. Like, these guys do seem to step up in those moments when they know that there's a lot riding on the round to follow, even if the call isn't necessarily the best. I think the player performance seems to get pushed that extra mile just because they have so much confidence in the system or the decisions that are being made, I guess, going into those rounds.
Yeah. I do have that problem too. You talk about the rifle core. I have tried to be nice about it, but I do still think Rez... I said sharp for now, and that's my problem. I still have my doubts. I had the doubt on the signing time. I'm still waiting to be proven wrong. Like, for me, that's one of those things where I want to go wrong so I can be right, Mm-hmm. Hopefully I continue to be wrong so that they can keep winning.
Well, I mean, it's probably the best rifling core that the GamerLegion organization can realistically acquire. I don't necessarily dispute that, for example, but I wouldn't say that's those are very. I wouldn't put them as very strong. They're pretty good.
I mean, as far as some of their parts, considering what they got out of Kios, GamerLegion have got some strong parts to work with for once.
True. And also as well, I think, not every team, and GamerLegion are probably one of those where, yes, the runs have been pretty good for them, and they've been climbing rankings, both HCV and VRS, but in a way, I still see them ever so slightly as a feeder team just because that's how the organization runs, right? They're obviously trying to stay as profitable as they can do. And at some point, this might be a case of where it is just this classic thing that Ash has had to deal with, of building these players up and then selling them on for an, absurd amount of money, but it keeps the organization, and it keeps everything kind of going. And then you just trust Ash again. You know, they've given him the reins of this team and said, like, you know, do what you want, pick up the players that you want, and we will just trust you as long as they fit within our budget. We're not going to say no ever, right? And it's working. And then he also has that thing, you know, as we saw with like Flamis, for example. He was only there for under a year, but he came in, did his job, helped his team, you know, succeed in massive ways, and then they sell him for what is apparently somewhere in the region of like $1 million USD. Everyone's happy, right? You know, you pick up a decent player, you make a lot of money for the organization to stay profitable, or at least remain somewhere around profitability in Counter-Strike. I think at the moment, GamerLegion are playing to the level I expect of them, maybe even like slightly higher. And considering all the teams around them are not like that, you know, like, you know, Furious and your Eternal Fires and etc. They're not feeder teams as much, and they're doing a really good job. And the teams that could be considered feeder teams below them, your teams like maybe your Heroics, for example, obviously kind of had their core taken a few times now, and I'd say they're doing better than Heroic, you know, at least in ranking wise and consistency wise. So I think GamerLegion are doing what I want of them, considering how the org sort of runs compared to a lot of teams in their kind of sort of field, I guess, which is sort of playoff material for tier 1 tournaments.
Yeah. Maybe they can build their way up. You know, that one big run invites the extra sponsor. All of a sudden, you can throw some money at someone. You can hold on to your players. Because, you know, Furia don't keep their players off the back of how well they're used. Let's put it that way. It's not because it's just the best situation to win Counter-Strike games. It's really not. But they do have something else going for them. Yeah. Neo, we're back to you. You've got back-to-back picks now. So who are you going to start off with?
I'll go one favorite, one underdog. I'll follow kind of Yumi's way of going about it. I think my favorite for me, I'm actually gonna go. It's between Pain and Furia here. I think I actually will go Pain over Furia for me in this one. As sort of my favorite team, I like this team a lot. I still think, you know, it's continued to be proven that Biggest Era is just the best IGL in South America. Like, it's like, for me, it's as simple as that, and actually has been for a while, and continues to make the team look really, really good. I've got to say, first of all, he's turned Snow into a very confident player. Yes, his rating doesn't run away with things, but that's going to happen in the roles that he plays, right? Playing a lot of anchor position on the CT side, that's going to happen, right? But I like how Snow plays. He's very confident for, 17 years of age or what he is. So, you know, pretty ridiculous in that sense. But I also like the Davideus pickup. There was a lot of people kind of questioning that move for me, but I like it a lot. I've always thought Davideus as a I think he's one of those players with like quite a high skill ceiling, but also unfortunately at times a bit of a low skill floor. You know, he can go missing occasionally, but when you get him playing to the level that he can play at, he is so fun to watch. Unbelievably talented. So I like this team. I think they've obviously been putting out some decent results throughout this year so far. You probably want a little bit more consistency out of them, but then again, when you like go into the real detail of their losses, right? Especially if we're talking just in particular land losses, right? We're talking, you know, at Cluj, lost to Maus, fair enough, won the whole tournament, right? Before that, the only other loss they got was a 2-1 against Mongols, and that was a really exciting game in itself, right? You know, going in towards that map 3 off the back of picking up on an overtime win on your own map, pick a Dust 2, and, you know, even lost Inferno on overtime as well. So it was close, right? There's a real world on another day, played the exact same way. We could have got like a 2-0 out for them, right? You know, managed to close out that Inferno in their favor and then going towards Dust 2 and see that off as well. So I like Pain. I think they are a side who really play up to the occasion. I think online, they can be a little flimsy at times, but who really cares about online for Pain? I think all their focus at the moment is on towards LAN, and some of their wins are really, really impressive. The VP1 looked clean. You know, before that, Charlotte and Falcons as well, which, you know, granted they did drop a map to them, but they're still getting wins there. This is a side for me who feel like they are at that top end of this play-in, and another one in a similar vein to kind of the previous arguments I made about you know, teams like your Eternal Fires, for example, or you kind of your GamerLegions. I just can't see them losing to these sort of lesser teams. Like, maybe they could pick up like one random upset loss to, like, you know, like a LynnVision somewhere if somebody just pops off, but as a whole, I see them being quite a consistent team against good level opposition, with how the Swiss will play out as well. You know, pick up a win and then playing against teams in sort of similar rankings. Then obviously the start off against house bets as well. Another one in a similar vein to sort of Fire, which, like, I'd be so surprised if house bets get like more than sort of 10 rounds against paying in towards this one. They very rarely struggle against considerably worse teams, and house bets are a considerably worse team. So I have a lot of faith in them just to be able to actually kind of coast through this, and then it's in towards the next stage where, again, I'd see them probably being able to scalp some of these bigger names. So if we look at just play-ins alone, a lot of these teams at the lesser end, I just don't think they're going to have to like worry too much about. Is sort of my main thing, and that's where I look at it for Pain. I like this team. I thought Davide's move on paper looked really good. It hasn't always proved itself in the server, but I'm going to give it time still. It's only been like a month and a bit, so I'm still not kind of fully sold on it being like, a lateral move or maybe even a little bit of a worse move. Pain is still playing good Counter-Strike, still picking up good wins, scalping wins from top teams as well, and even their losses are pretty close. So for the most part, I'm convinced of them just if we just hone in on this play-ins alone.
Yeah, I think Davideus is definitely has less variance than Lux, for example. I think the reason it was so curious to why they made the move was that Lux actually seemed like he was on a pretty good trajectory as a player, like added confidence, very aggressive, actually made quite a lot of good decisions, I think. So it led me to believe that there was probably just like a personality issue with outside of the server. Maybe it's like a mood or a leadership thing. I always saw Big Uzera as like the dad of Pain, and I believed that they brought Davideus in as the first Chilean representative at a major, as to sort of serve as a stepdad that could co-parent this team, just in case they ended up in games where they're playing up against these top level teams and the younger players are kind of shutting down or not listening to calls or getting into bad moods because they're losing rounds. I think positives out of Cluj was that NQZ actually looked pretty competent for most of the tournament in a way that I wasn't really expecting from him. I think he's kind of been on a down.
That was going to be my question. I was like, if people are buying Pain stock, do we believe in NQZ? Because I think that kind of has to be the case. Because so often in the past, I'm like, oh, they got to win.
Yeah.
Big Zero really outcalled the other team's IGL, outshot half the other team's riflers, and then everyone else had okay moments, but that was about it. Are we buying the NQZ stock? Essentially, his stock is now directly tied to Pain for me. Like, are we on that hype train?
I don't know if I'd necessarily call it a hype train, but I think he's recovering. I thought this was a level that he actually had in him before, and he just sort of hit a real downturn.
In theory, I heard about it.
Yeah.
I just don't watch much Brazilian Counter-Strike, so I saw the EU stuff. I was like, well, he's whatever. Big Uzera, please save them. So we are up for it. We are thinking this is the new normal.
I'd say so. I mean, even if you like kind of hone into sort of, I won't look at the kind of, actually, so you look at the recent tournament as a whole, right? And in basically every game, bar their last loss to Mao's, NQZ is either at the top of the scoreboard or towards the top. He's actually doing his job for me. Like Virtus Pro, he was pretty nuclear in that game, right? Like so clean all the way throughout, not given like loads of opportunities, but still managed to overcome that. And then even in that game against the Mongols, right, which was a pretty unfortunate game, whatever you want to put it. I mean, I think he had kind of 9-10 in a chokehold in that game. He was the best player in the server. Like not only just like rating wise, but he actually looked like the best player without a shadow of a doubt. Just the fact that the rifling caused him to step up. I think if you look at that Pain game, as much as I love the Mongols, if we'd had like a little bit more out of like Kawes, I think in particular, or a little bit more out of Big Azera, who does put up good numbers, I think they win that. NQZ was so strong in that match. He had just shy of 100 ADR. I'm looking at the stats now, it's ridiculous. 68-49, just shy of 100 ADR, 1.31 rating. I mean, he had that team sweating. And when you're looking towards the game, he's so confident as well. So a while ago put NQZ as one of my like ones to watch players. I think it was like maybe like 2022 or something. And he, for the years following it, like never really lived up to it. He had all these kind of moves where he was sort of these changing rosters and these swap deals with like 9Z and Double O Nation and that kind of vibe. It never seemed to work. Legacy was like all right in a sense, but I think he's coming towards Pain. I've actually been super impressed with him. I think Big Azera has made him have a lot more confidence in his own ability, probably because these previous teams before have actually been just kind of rough, and I think he's probably got way less of a voice in those previous teams. Now he's coming towards Pain, and I think Big Azera has given him a little bit of freedom and say, right, play how you want to play and we'll just adapt to it. And for me, at least in terms of his individual rating, it seems like it's working out like super well. He looks so clean. I think if he plays the level he can play, he is one of the scariest players in the server.
Listen, I'm not going to say, whether or not NQC is getting those freedoms. I think he probably is. But the whole comparison that was building up to was, Davideus, I thought was going to be a secondary leader on this team. Like, if not if not actually with calling, then, it's kind of an emotional leader or a rock that they could, I guess, lean on when they needed it most. I actually don't think he is that for the team. I don't think I've seen, and maybe this is just PGL and the camera work, but I don't think I've seen Big Uzera so fucking pissed all the time, even in their wins. I think he seemed like he was super frustrated. He was angry at certain players. He was like scolding them almost. And I didn't see the emotional recovery or calmness that I think I've seen previously from Big Uzera led squads. In a way, I think the move has not landed the way that I wanted to. Maybe that's just early teething issues, but I think the talent of Davideus, if NQZ can maintain that form, then yeah, this team actually does have a lot of merit. I think, Snow has, and I've said this before, Snow has kind of underwhelmed me with his performance because everyone touted him as like this young up and coming star, and he's okay. He's good in like these chaotic moments, but not every round is going to be, coming at you fast with a million flashes going everywhere, and the other team is a little bit perplexed and confused. That's what Snow needs, I think, to thrive. And it's kind of how he was raised in Counter-Strike. I just don't see the consistency from him, and especially in these anchor sort of positions. I think he's actually the most susceptible to sort of falling apart and crumbling. That's maybe why he has to scream and run that emotion so high when things are going right. Because when things start going wrong, I think he's one of those players that does kind of shut down.
Yeah. I'm not too sold. That's my problem. I've seen one good event out of NQZ, Cluj-Napoca. I've seen too many bad ones, and that's essentially why I asked the question, because I have seen, like, I think a lot of people, like, I think Maui's pretty big on NQZ. He has been historically, and he was, I think, making allusions to the fact that this is the event where you're starting to see what NQZ can do. But for me, as someone who hasn't bought the stock, hasn't bought in, isn't on whatever you want to call it, the recovery train, rather than the hype train, I'm still very cautious with my pain hopes, hence my pick of GamerLegion. So I was just curious to get your take specifically on him because of his abnormality, I guess, for me. Yeah. That event was a bit of a fluke, at least in terms of rating relative to his norms. No, Ne0kai, back to you. You've got 2 underdog slots left to fill, and pretty much a full board, aside from FlyQuest being taken off your hands, so take your shot.
Yeah, I think for mine, I might also kind of play a little bit safe. There was between 2 in my head of kind of where I go here, and it's between, I guess, the 2 best underdogs left, and they're M80 and LynnVision. I'm actually not going to go LynnVision, though. Reason being is that I've seen too many bad maps from LynnVision recently, which worry me a little bit. I've been covering quite a decent amount of the kind of ESL Challenger League Asia, and they've been picking up some weird losses where it's just like, oh, that's not what you want to be seeing from this, especially for LynnVision as well. Like I saw them at the Blast Rising event look a little rough. Best of 3 loss to the Huns never really should happen, and they lost to the Huns a few times as well. So for that reason, I'm going to go M80 as my pick. I think domestically M80 have actually looked really, really solid. They've their sort of a Blast Rising event, they qualified flawlessly. They didn't even drop a map to Nount, NRG, and Boss as expected, sure, but it's good to see that they are just remaining like a dominant North American side. Also got to catch them at a LAN event earlier in the year, and the only loss they picked up was 2 500, once in a best of 1, the other time in the grand final in a 2-0, but that was also with a standing. Keto was standing in, and I think actually Keto looked really good in that standing position because Rek had broken his leg, I'm pretty sure was the issue, but it seems like he's fit to travel now, which is all good. But I like M80. I think this is a team that there's even minus Malbs have still remained pretty interesting to watch. I think Lake kind of filling in towards that spot seems like this sort of next best North American player kind of coming through their pretty limited domestic pool, which is obviously kind of always chaotic. We always hear about the stories from North America just being cursed. But Lake seems to be one of the very few kind of shining stars, and I think they're just a super fun CS team to watch. Like, not only in terms of in the server and the way they play, I've also got to back UKCS a little bit with Def. So, I kind of support him there too. But as a whole, I think they have just been quite interesting to watch. I think Sin's a pretty good caller, put some good numbers too. Lake's exciting. Rek, I think, is super solid. Swisher, maybe I want a little bit more out of him just because I know what the level he can play at is. But one of the reasons why I love M80 is stuff, not just inside but outside. You know, they're a very loud team. They're fun to watch in studio environments like this Pro League going to be. They get fired up. They make sure to shout. They really start to kind of live in the moment a lot. And I think that's going to be a big thing for them, especially against teams that are in a similar area to them. You know, you're talking at teams like your LynnVisions, your NRGs, your FlyQuest, that kind of vibe. I actually think they can potentially put a lot of pressure on them. And because they are generally a louder, hype team, they're very good at snowballing as well. They get a lot of momentum on their side. They're a side who I think struggle a little bit. Momentum's not with them, and they struggle to kind of stamp it out a bit. But when they've got it, they're a really hard team to slow down at this sort of a level, because we've got a lot of what I would say beatable teams, also slightly quieter teams as well. And I think that sometimes does get overlooked. In these studio environments, you're going to be able to hear everything. No matter how good the headphones are, you're going to be able to see them standing up and see them shouting. And that's something M80 do very, very well. And they're very good at using that to their advantage. So I've been a fan of M80. I think as underdog teams go, they're a team who I really could see, you know, beating teams like an MIBR, like a SAW, even putting pressure on teams like your 3D Maxes and your Heroics as well. And play some good Counter-Strike, right? I mean, Slacks has on a lot of question marks about him, you know, forever, basically. But I think since he's been on M80, he continues to prove a lot of it wrong, that he's being a little bit more proactive, and he's actually starting to get into the thick of it more so than he did previously on teams like Alternate Attacks and whatnot. So I like this team. You probably want a little bit more out of your rifling core, in particular to kind of supporting players in Swisher and Rec. But as a whole, I think Lake does enough of the kind of space creation for me. I think that's just where he needs a bit more support. But I like M80 a lot. I think they're exciting to watch. And I back them in terms of I trust them more than I do like a LynnVision or a Tyloo or an NRG or an Nemiga as well, right? I think like all of those teams have in different periods of their life at the moment. Nemiga, massively downtrending right now, and I feel like M80, if we're talking comparatively, I can't see what in which Nemiga are able to kind of put pressure on. LynnVision have had a lot of struggles domestically, and that says a lot, because sure, the North American scene's not, you know, much better, if better than Asia compared to North America. But at the same time, I feel like I just have a lot more confidence in to be a little bit more consistent in this event. And sort of that's where I'm leaning them over some of the alternatives I could have gone for.
Yeah, I mean, listen, M80 are basically like, I want to think of them as North American GamerLegion, you know, kind of better than the sum of their parts. Maybe they're like a little bit less complicated and a little bit less complex. I also think they've hit a hard kind of ceiling where the best teams that they can beat are North American teams and maybe some South American teams. And, you know, when they were in Europe, they did beat teams like Sashi, for example, which, you know, to be honest, I think are kind of a more strategically deep team than, I guess, a heavy hitting one. But yeah, M80 I mean, me and T have both said a lot about M80 before in terms of like the direction of the project and what they've been doing. And the fact that they've recovered players like Slacks, but I think this team has kind of hit a plateau, and I'm not sure that they can ever really level past that, unfortunately.
True, but I would actually agree with that. The kind of counter is that, again, you have to look at the scope of this tournament and say, even with a plateau, I think their plateau is still higher than a lot of the other underdogs there.
I'm pretty confident that if they lose to FlyQuest, they will place dead last.
Really? Okay, so I can't see that. I can't see them losing to like.
Well, okay, maybe not. But if they get a Mind Freak or a house bet,
which they will in an O2 game, they will.
Like, yeah.
Well, yeah, exactly. They're guaranteed to get like a house bet or a Mind Freak.
Okay, sorry, second to last.
It's different.
No, it is. I know.
Let's say it's like a 1-2 game though. Like I would see probably your teams like your Tyloos and your Nemiga and maybe your NRGs in that kind of scope. Maybe your LynnVision
I could see Tyloo, LynnVision, Nemiga beating this team.
I don't know about Tyloo. They just seem like they're so all over the place right now. Like, you know, minus Jamyoung plus Jamyoung. Jamyoung wanted to go to Valorant. They're not going towards Valorant. You know, all of this kind of like weird stuff that's going on. Like you know, with them having like instabilities, I actually think M80 look like a little bit more of like a solid team for that sense.
Yeah, maybe I'm just not respecting them to that same degree, because I do like the way that they play. I guess I'm down on them because I don't expect anything more from this roster than what they've already kind of given the circuit already. You know, I'm not hyped up about them. I'm not amped like, oh yeah, go M80. I really want you to do well. Now it's just kind of like, you're there again, and I know what I'm probably gonna get the same thing I did last time.
I actually like this pick more than I like the FlyQuest pick. I think they're going to beat FlyQuest in the opening game because I know what I'm getting and I know I'm going to get it. Like, I know the style, plus I know who's going to deliver. I know they're going to play pretty smash mouth. Lake is going to be in FlyQuest Grill. Yeah. And I think he's going to hit more shots. Like, he's going to be the stronger rifler. Like,
I agree.
Than the FlyQuest riflers taking those opening engagements. Like, he's just going to be able to win that. They're going to have, I think, FlyQuest's going to have the better AWPer overall. But how he gets used, how he gets placed, how many dead situations does he have to rotate into, There's only so much you can do as an AWPer.
I'll be honest right now, I think Slacks is the better AWPer.
Nah.
Me to be. If as someone that picked FlyQuest, I think
Forgive
he's the
him,
better
Father,
AWPer.
he does not know what he says. Regali is twice the man. But anyway.
I don't think you've watched these games with Regali, brother.
I have. I've watched a lot of Regali, and my life was Regali at one point. And yes, recently he's not Regali of Prime, obviously. But I refuse to hear this blasphemy. No matter what he's like one of those 35-year-old football players who moves back to Brazil. You still can't call him trash. Like, I know he is. He's fat and he's lazy and he's not the same player. And I'm not going that far with Regali. He is still in his
comeback starts now.
He's back in his prime. I promise you. He's the best player on FlyQuest.
What did Neymar do to you, man? But
honestly, I have to watch him. That's what he did to me. Yeah. Crying and rolling around.
The thing the way that I put it though is like you said, I feel like I probably backed the rifling core a little bit more over towards M80. And even if I actually do value Regali as a better player than Slacks. And I think his ceiling is higher. But if we're looking at the moment where Regali's looking a little bit up in the air, and then you also consider that even if Regali's playing lights out, I don't think Slacks is going to be completely pocketed in that sort of head-to-head duel. So I think, if you kind of take the two AWPers out of the contention, which does happen quite a lot for both of these two teams, you got to put it down to the rifling and to the calling as well. And I also back Sin over I back Dexter. Like I value him as not only a better player, but a better caller too. So I'm sort of with you. As much as I like FlyQuest and I like Regali a lot as an individual, I probably actually back M80 over them.
The part that holds me back from being super excited, the reason I'm taking GamerLegion as my second favorite rather than trying to find value in these top-end underdog picks, like by picking in M80, is that I'm concerned about, firstly, Rek, he's good to travel. Is he going to be comfortable? Yeah. And Swisher has a flaw that I don't like, and I see it too often. And I've seen it a couple times already this year. And when they're playing the Ice Challenge, they lose to 500 like just twice. And look, 500 are a esoteric team to play against. Let's put it that way. They have a style that's annoying and very repetitive. So you feel like you can counter them, but you never really can just because of the way they execute their plans. So I get the loss. They're a weird team to play against, but I still think you should be beating them overall if you are M80. So I'm just concerned about the flaw and the performance I saw out of Swisher in that series, especially like if that can rear its ugly head, how much they can actually win across the event. That's why I'm talking, when I'm looking at these underdogs, I'm looking for moonshots. Like I'm playing hearts, I'm shooting the moon. Like give me all the risk just so in case I can get that reward. That's why I didn't quite like these two picks that much, but I do think M80 win this opening game. And after that, who knows who they get matched up with? You never know what's going to happen in the Swiss, who's going to get upset where. I mean, sure, some games feel like a done deal, but some others aren't. So we'll see how it plays out. But no, M80, yeah, that rifle core, it's got a lot of punch. I feel like FlyQuest just aren't in a position right now to take that kind of hit. I believe we're back to me, are we not?
Yeah. It is your turn.
Well, I've got two underdogs to pick, and no one else wants LynnVision. I'll take them. I'll take the risk. Because I have not watched a damn second of them with Sue.
I love it.
I have only so many hours in my day. They're BO1s versus Lord knows who at 3 in. I'm just not watching. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
When they're playing LFO2 or Fung Da, like I'm sorry, I'm busy. I got content to make. I got stuff to do.
But Cheng King is the GOAT.
The reason I'm picking them is the reason I've always followed or paid attention to LynnVision, but also other teams. I still think Starry is going to break out and be one of the best players of the non-tier 1 world. Maybe he could eventually break into legit tier 1 contention if he's ever on the right team, the right situation. But for me, I'm a huge fan of Starry. I think Zaka and Westmelon are two of the more like reliable parts of Chinese CS, which I feel weird saying out loud, but like I generally think they are going to play okay Counter-Strike, and they're going to have other pieces beyond that one star who's OP, like a lot of Chinese teams have been historically. Like, they're going to have more than just a couple aimers.
Just for your reasoning, and I'm not sure, because if you've not watched them since they've got Call Me Sue, Zacher is AWPing now. Just
yeah,
so
I was on that.
Okay.
I was aware of that. I'm
just making sure.
He was better on the AWP than he was on the rifle anyway, so I'm glad. For me, Zacher on the AWP's pretty solid. Again, this is a big gamble because we're talking about a team who I don't like overall structure, the actual depth of the strat book, not that crazy. But look, their opening matchup is Furia. That's what I'm talking about. You don't know what upsets are going to happen. That's an upset I think has a very strong chance of happening. In terms of Furia are a team who will let you in. They will give you the opportunity to beat them over and over again. They will take maps off. They will be very lackadaisical in the way they take fights. They'll kind of just forget the game plan, it feels like sometimes, especially on maps they don't pick. They don't seem entirely there when they start on the CT side. So I'm very excited to watch LynnVision play that game. And overall, I am talking mostly about the talent of some individuals, but it's undeniable and it's always a threat. And so I'm going to take them, not necessarily because I don't know who they can beat beyond Furia in terms of the top 8 teams. But this is the Chaos, this is the Swiss system. They might have a chance to beat 3 of the weaker teams. Maybe if they face an MIBR at some point, maybe if they face SAW, somehow SAW make it through the winner's side of everything, they might end up facing them again. I think LynnVision have a good chance to just upset a few of these teams who are not going to take them seriously and not be quite aware of just how strong of aimers they are. Like, I know people should know this by now, but it still feels like it sometimes gets overlooked. So that's my LynnVision pick. It's a moonshot. As I said, I didn't like some of these other underdogs who are, more standard. I've seen more of them playing. I don't really like what I've seen. I'm going to take a bit of an unknown who have talents that I enjoy.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're wrong. Mainly because I think Westmelon doesn't play or call the same way as he does when he's playing domestic Counter-Strike. I think this team actually looks like uncomfortable when they ever take their steps overseas. In the few outings that they've had, Westmelon, for those uninitiated, he kind of stomps and like hardcore frag calls, kind of like a Big Uzera-esque type of player within the domestic region. And then they go overseas and he's playing more passive and not being as aggressive. And it leaves a lot for the rest of the team to, I guess, try and compensate. And before, he didn't actually really have the firepower to back that up. And, during the weird period where Lynn were getting picked apart and we didn't know if they were playing tournaments or what have you, that cycle in particular, I think really took its toll. But now that Zacher, Starry, Emilia's kind of leveled up a little bit, and now Call Me Sue, who is going to be the best name in Counter-Strike if they end up doing well, it can alleviate that strain, and these are players that should work a little bit more autonomously. I think it can shield it. I just think that they actually might even have too many cooks. I worry that Call Me Sue is, from what I can tell, kind of calling intuitively his own number. I think Zacher is a very vocal, independent piece. I think Starry is kind of that way as well. And when I'm thinking about an in-game leader, Westmelon actually seemed to have a very firm sort of wrangle on his troops before. Emilia might be the only piece that doesn't feel like he can do things. But when you have too many moving pieces, then it's very difficult to create and craft a whole picture. I think that's, in the limited exposure I've had to LynnVision since they've made the roster moves, that's, I guess, one of the things I did kind of notice is that, they didn't take time to freeze, reset, actually come up with a plan. It was kind of just like, I'm going to continue limit testing and we'll see how far I go. And it sometimes worked, it sometimes didn't. That's not the kind of variance I want them to have in a tournament where, yeah, I actually do think, it's not totally unrealistic to beat a Furia. It's just, they will get punished for that type of play more often than they do domestically.
Yeah, I mean, for LynnVision, for me, I feel like I think they beat a lot of teams domestically who they should be beating. These kind of random teams like your Feng Dars.
They just kind of stomp them, though, is the problem.
It's true. And I've caught a couple of these games as well, and they've not, they've been whatever, right? Super expected wins. It's just like some of these losses that you look towards them. losses towards the Huns. The Huns aren't a bad team by any means, but they should be being able to sort of dispatch them. I would say easily, and they don't. They have a couple of struggles here and there, and even look at some of these losses that they had right towards the start of the year against like Rare Atom in a best of 3 as well. Even look towards the tail end of last year, it seems like FlyQuest. I mean, I don't mind LynnVision. I think they're an okay team, and I think they do have individuals, but it's such a hard kind of prediction of what they're going to look like on LAN in Europe as well in an international tournament. I feel like they just don't seem that secure for me. They could very easily overperform and they're like, okay, this is kind of surprising, but then I doubt long term there's anything there. Or at the same vein, we could kind of flip a coin and be like, oh, okay, these guys have actually finished 1 and 3. That's not too much of a surprise either, right? And this is unfortunately the thing with LynnVision is like they've got talent. It's probably actually a similar argument to sort of Tyloo in a way of like they've got talent, but like what do we actually expect from them internationally? And this is the thing, I know everyone kind of jokes about it when we do the major kind of pick'ems and say, never pick Asian teams as your 0-3, they always get a win. That is true. They do always get a win, but they always get a win and go 1-3. So, the end result is still relatively similar. I think, unfortunately for LynnVision, it kind of might be sort of similar here. I think I can maybe, I can see them beating, obviously, your house bets and your mind freaks pretty comfortably. I think, even teams like your Tyloos could be quite an interesting little kind of derby there. Nemiga with them downward trending, I can even see them picking up a win there. But it's just whether they get those kind of preferable matchups. All it actually takes for LynnVision's tournament to be rough is one of the bigger teams to underperform early, right? Go like 1-2 or 1-1, and LynnVision just get a really bad run of things. And with their seeding, it might even end up happening, right? So I like some of the talent on LynnVision. I want to see kind of Kobe Sue do well. Obviously, a lot of kind of North American kind of claiming him, obviously, as having played in North America for a little bit. And he seems like quite an interesting player from what I've seen. Zach is always really fun. Like you mentioned, Story is really someone that I loved. It's quite sad that sort of Tyloo super team never actually ended up working out, because that whole idea of like Mosaic, Story, Jamyoung all together is like, oh, this is super exciting, but it never ended up being anything really there. And obviously, he's gone back to LynnVision, and I think it's probably just a little bit more of a comfortable home for him. And if Story is comfortable, he plays good. So there's a world that there's stuff to like. But yeah, in terms of like what I expect out of them, I don't expect them to make it through. And they could very easily just like bomb out and finish it in that kind of second to last category. And it wouldn't be like massively surprising.
Yeah, it's a gamble. But I don't like the rest of them.
Yeah. Fair enough.
I don't like them at all.
Sure.
Yumi, you got back-to-back picks.
Well, yeah, I mean, I have to go for an underdog here, and I'm going to go for another one of these gambles. The high variance, totally random, crazy late round calls team in Nemiga. I've decided to go for this squad because, I don't know, they're kind of fun. And I think Zhui and Xanter, to be honest, Lear individually as well, these guys can take control of games. Listen, Xanter I know is currently... But I think there's a lot of merit to Zhui and Lear, the way he calls. They're kind of one of these teams where, say what you want about, these squads that are a little bit more, gamble heavy or stack heavy. Nemiga are a team that do like to make those types of calls late rounds on CT and T side. They like to keep their opponent on their toes. They make gambly plays a lot. And sometimes that doesn't work, and they are made to look like fools. But in an underdog category, I think that's exactly the type of team I actually want. Something that's a bit more sporadic and random. I think they actually have some talent on this roster between, I thought there was even the chance that maybe Lear gets called up for in-game leading tasks in a Russian-speaking team, because considering seems to be I don't want to say droughts, but there is a limitation to the amount of in-game leaders that we have in that realm right now. And I just think Zhui is kind of that next big thing, and he currently is housed within Nemiga. So this team is fun, and they can get wins over teams like MIBR. They can get wins over teams like 3D Max probably. So I fancy their chances, even though Khan can't hit shots on the AWP a lot of the time. And that was the sort of running narrative towards the end of last year, is like Sangal and Nemiga are basically the same team, just on that same trajectory, and they both have terrible AWPers, or support AWPers, that's what we're calling them. They throw all the util, they throw all the flashes because they don't shoot. Even though Khan, unironically, good crosshair placement. Like, if this guy was a rifler, actually probably would be like suitable within this squad. I've seen him have incredible rounds on rifles, and then I will watch him buy an AWP and literally grief the next round.
Yeah, it's a weird one. I
Yeah.
don't know, Neo, about you, but for me, I've seen too much of them online recently with a lot of rough losses. I know you've talked about,
Yeah.
other teams having rough losses. Have you seen any of Nemiga's? Is there something
Yeah,
that,
so
is there something to
sadly-
salvage, really?
sadly, I've had to cast them, and I feel like even the money's not worth it, right? I feel like sometimes I want to turn down this pay packet because I've been subjected to some Nemiga games because they've actually been pretty brutal. Even the wins they pick up are so ugly. Like they're like so. Every time I've been doing a pre-show coming in towards an Nemiga game, I've always said the same thing of like no matter what you think about these guys and what they did last year, like I Am Chengdu was a great run for them, and obviously they kind of used that to kind of keep themselves in a very competitive spot within the overall circuit. But they've actually just really looked rough. I've been saying for a while though, and I will always say this, like I've always said like Xanta's the truth, because I actually think when Xanta plays well, he's so fun to watch, and I feel like especially when they initially lost Flammus to GamerLegion, I feel like Xanta did a lot of the heavy lifting. As much as Zwei came in, I actually thought it was Xanta who was doing a lot of great work. But again, this year, that it's not been nearly enough. And, if touching on Zwei, right, I think he's a player who has been touted by some of the best, right? It's this kind of next up and coming prodigy. He got bold prediction nominations from #1 in the world, Donk, and #2, Monacy. So it's pretty big kind of, shoes to fill in a sense, right? And also kind of Flammus's shoes in particular. But he's actually not looked that confident at all. I think, when I've seen him, especially recently, he's really actually looked quite rough. And if you look at him overall, since coming in towards this Nemiga roster, he's now been with them, looking at now 8 months, and he's got a 1.06 rating. Like, for the roles he plays, the positions he plays, it actually just isn't good enough, right? They are so reliant on other people to pick up the slack for him, and that worries me quite a bit, right? I just think for me that this team I've not loved. I think one thing as well, which I actually am quite interested to see on LAN what it's like, but one thing that I've always critiqued in the Nemiga about, especially since casting them recently, winning or losing, but in particular when they're losing and they're, losing like 4 or 5 rounds in a row and they're in a bit of a rot form, they never call timeouts. They just let it play out, and they just you can see this map loss happening and they do nothing to stop it. They just buy back in and go again, right? And they never try and shut this down. And I actually am really interested when they're on LAN, and obviously Box is there in person with them, if he's going to try and be a little bit more proactive in terms of the attack pauses and stuff like that, because we'll see at least once throughout this tournament where they'll play a map, and it might even actually be against MIBR in their opening game where, they'll play a map out the gates and they'll go 6-7-1 down, stuff like that. They won't call a pause. They'll just let the half play out, lose it, 9-3, and then be like, all right, cool. Now we're going to recover off the back of this 3-minute halftime break. And it's like, they just don't give themselves a lot of luxury, where I think at least when you see these top tier 2 teams, I think Beta are a great example when times, anything goes wrong for them, they immediately call for a pause, they reset, and they reevaluate what's going on, and then they're able to make some sort of things work for them. But Nemiga, recently, it just feels like they're running through the motions in online Counter-Strike, which isn't not always a good thing. It's great when it's working and you're picking up wins because you can slowly scale up these rankings, but some of the losses they pick up do worry me a bit. I caught they lost against Cyberstroke. I watched a bit of that one. That was not a fun one. Cyberstroke aren't a bad team by any means, but they should be dispatching them. They lost them a few times. I watched their game against Bait. Same thing again. Bait, it shouldn't actually really even gone to a third. Bait should have been able to close that in 2. I think they just fell asleep a little bit. And then, previously other teams that I think are actually very respectable. ParaVision, I think, are massively underrated right now in terms of their actual ranking. I think they're a top tier 2 team without a doubt. Belchnok and Nota are 2 of the best riflers in tier 2 without a shadow of a doubt. James still incredible.
And James is sick, yeah, of course he is. We
The
always
team is
knew.
great. Exactly. So they're super fun. I just think they're actually in a brutal spot. They've got the harsh end of VRS where they just have to climb from ranking of nothing all the way up. But it will happen in due time. I'm so confident that ParaVision will be a top tier 2 team without a shadow of a doubt. And they put away teams like Nemiga quite easily. So for me, Nemiga have not convinced me this year. They're downward trending massively off the back of a fairly good 2024, and they're just not being able to rekindle the flame in terms of that form. And I actually don't think this land's really going to help at all. And the thing that makes matters worse is because they play so much online Counter-Strike to very middling success, is that there's actually a lot of tape on them, so they're very easy to prepare for. And especially teams with big support staff, teams like your MIBR, for example, there's so much tape to go over and be like, this is how they play. They also don't change up things a lot. I think Nemiga, every single time I watch them, at least I've caught the last 4 games of theirs, 3 of which are in CCT, 1 was here to Challenge League. more or less same veto, and they play the exact same style. And if things go wrong, they just live and die by the sword, which is great if it works, but it's really ugly if it doesn't. So Nemiga worried me actually quite a bit. I'm not being a huge fan of them this year. I think I'd actually probably say, like, even though their ranking is going down, I actually probably still think they are actually inflated.
Yeah, listen, I mean, they may not be the best, but I think they're the best of the rest. I have.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, I have little confidence in NRG, Tyloo, Housebet, Mind Freak. I don't want any of these guys, so I'm not doing it.
Yeah.
And to be honest, I think they just have, because of the way they play, they have enough variety and they're a bit more random that I think they can maybe squeak through with a win. So that's my justification. I have faith in Lear to call random as hell mid rounds.
Yeah, I have to agree that I do think they're better than the rest. I'll give you that. But whether they're going to do anything at this tournament, I actually really doubt.
Yeah, I've got a problem with what I'm supposed to be buying into in terms of their top-end talent, because I'm supposed to believe Wise this, up-and-coming prodigy. He's going to be the guy. That's all well and good, but unless that's going to be today...
Yeah.
Doesn't serve me much, does it? And Xanta's on the way out. Risky Bob's had the occasional land pop-off. I guess I can maybe have some cope on. And we know Khan's kind of trash, so I'm just a bit, dubious of their overall actual win condition.
What I will say is that, I actually don't think, I think at first they tried to make Xanter take Flamus's roles, but I think Risky Bob actually shouldered a lot of that responsibility on T sides, like just being headstrong, aggressive. All the rest of the team is doing shit. Let me just swing. He is risky, and his name is Bob, I suppose. Like that's actually just how he seems to characterize himself when we see him on T sides, and it does help. They create, I guess, like a buffer window, but this team is random, and I can in a way kind of fuck with it just because I like teams that are willing to take risks. Maybe not as many risks as Nemiga, but it'll have to do. You'll have to do.
Yeah. Put it this way was why at the start of the year I made a list of like my, I always do like a ones to watch for the year of like players that I think could kind of break into tier 1 at some point. And I'll toot my own horn. Basically every year I've kind of got most of them pretty correct, right? And I had Zwei originally when I made this list in early January. And I still haven't recorded the video because I'm a lazy piece of shit. But I actually have taken Zwei out of the list now. I've moved him out of the top 5 into. I think he's currently in like honorable mentions sort of thing, but like he's outside of my like top 5 of players I think can actually pop up because I've cast them a lot because I've been doing quite a lot of the CCT, and every single time like I don't see it yet. Maybe in FPL he's doing stuff that I haven't seen, but from officials it's just not been there.
Yeah, there was the occasional moment last year where I was told he would be the truth, and I watched games. I was like, that was a nice play. Crosshair placement's nice. Certain things I can enjoy. But I need a bit more. I need more to be buying in here. And yeah, I have hedged my bet on a very different set of criteria in terms of just picking pure ugly talent, like nothing else to it. Nothing pretty about the team play. It's just talent I've picked. And I might have to do that again because I have one more pick. And it's got to be an underdog as well. You got double pick, my bad. You got a favorite to fill in. Yeah.
So this is the problem. I know we did actually spend a lot of time on Nemiga, so I'm just gonna rush through this one and just do it completely off of vibes and because I want to talk about him. I'm picking SAW. Unbelievably weird run at Cluj-Napoca. Remnants of a dead squad. Weirdly kicking their 2 best players, but adding Azu and Sejot from Endpoint, who have recently shelved their Counter-Strike team. So had to get rid of the player somehow. And to be fair, as far as I'm aware, there was even talks about players not re-signing with Endpoint, even if the org didn't I guess shelve the whole roster. But I guess I want to turn a little bit of a blind eye to all the shenanigans of the SAW organization because I do want players like Story and Muterus to have homes where they can feel like they genuinely can break into that top rung of Counter-Strike. I still think Muterus calls a pretty solid game, and I think Agil, weirdly, like great soldier, actually decent fragger as well, given his, I guess, last minute replacement stand-in sort of entry to this role. and now they have to speak in English. The more I talk about it, the more I hate it. But I also didn't want to game the system and have Nemiga and MIBR when they are playing each other in the first round, and that to me was going to be a little bit boring. So I'm picking Seoul. They had a weird run. They did win an event. That's how they qualified to the play-in stage. Even when that being said, they had Udrix at the very least, or Rosdos. I forget which one got
it was
poached
Udrix, I believe.
Yeah. And yeah, I just think they call a decent game. I think story is fine on the AWP, and I'm kind of keen to see how this team does because I'm going to put a lot of scrutiny on Golden. I've said I was down on the roster. They were playing terribly, and Golden was supposed to be the one that inspired me with hope. If I'm going to reflect any positives in the miracle that was Cluj-Napoca, then I have to give a little bit of credence to Golden for making the team, I guess, prepared enough for that, and Muterus respectively. I want to see this team do well just from a pure selfish point of view, if I'm going to be completely honest.
That's interesting. I mean, look, Neo, we've got Azuwu here.
Yeah.
New king of UKCS, I guess, in tier 2 at least. Obviously, we've got Mezzi in tier 1, no need to think about it. But I don't know, he's a player I kind of like the look of a while back. Just before he signed for Endpoint, I think I stuck him in a video and was like, not bad. B+, I think I said literally at the time. Do you see this as upgrades, these two guys, Sejo and Azuwu? I mean, personally, cutting Roman, I mean, I've been calling him dog for like 3 years.
Yeah.
I don't know, Sure had one pop-off event and then gets cut. Do you see these guys as clear upgrades, or is it going to be a bit difficult to sort through?
I actually see Azu as an upgrade just because maybe it comes from a place of bias. I've done Oscar for so long that I think I probably just do in that sense. But I really like Azu as a player. I think he is a guy who has actually a pretty decent ceiling on him. I actually want to see him playing lands, right? I want to see what he can do proving himself against kind of like, the rest, right? Because I don't think Endpoint gave him that opportunity. I had him in a bowl prediction video of my own, I think about 2 years ago now, just before he got picked up by Endpoint. And then in my review saying, picked up by Endpoint in the last kind of 6 months of this year and has actually been really solid with them. But it's just unfortunate that as he got picked up, Endpoint just started drastically moving down the rankings, so they were never going to get towards LAN. So I'm interested to see what this guy can do on LAN. I think he is really talented. I don't think he really doesn't ever seem to get nervous by the lights in that sense, as some of these younger players do. It's actually CJOT I do worry about. I liked CJOT kind of for a bit on Sprout. I actually, okay, this is a kid who's maybe got, a bit of talent up his sleeve. I did not rate him on Endpoint at all. I didn't get to catch that many Endpoint games towards the tail end because they were so down the ranking that, I ain't touching those tournaments. But they were really, really rough. And I think obviously a lot of it comes down to the team falling apart in itself. But I wasn't a fan of Sejon. I am actually quite surprised that Saul went for that pickup. It might just be like a necessity thing. Just be like, he's there, he's easy, he can kind of just fill a role a little bit. But I think
might have been like a package deal with Endpoint as well,
exactly, right? I think like Azu is like the real shining light for me in terms of the two. But now changing language. I think they've still got pieces that I like. I still think Story is a very solid AWPer. I think Agil actually has some pretty decent pop-off moments. I've caught him at times where he's actually really solid. So I'll give Agil some credit there. Another thing I do actually worry about a little bit with Saw, and I feel like I'm the only one who said this. And actually, when I did say this publicly, I kind of got berated for this, which I was weirdly quite surprised about. I don't rate Golden as a coach, like, at all. I don't know why, like, people do. Because, like, he had, like, that, I say briefish stint on Godsend. But, like, I actually don't think he's done anything to prove to me that he can be, like, a good coach. And I thought he was a pretty middling IGL towards the tail end as well. So, like, I don't know. Like, I feel like this team feels like in a weird spot for me. I don't really know what to expect of them. I don't really rate Golden that highly as a coach. I don't love what I saw from Sejo for like the last 12 months as well. So you're putting a lot of faith in Azu coming in and putting up a lot of numbers for you to help support people like your Agils and your Stories. And it is a big ask for like, this, a young player into kind of a team now coming in English as well. It's a bit of a change. I don't know. I think it's going to be a bit weird. It's going to be funky. But at the same time, who do I favor, Saw or house bets? I'm always going to go Saw. So I think they're going to pick up wins. It's just, can they make it to the next stage? They could squeak through, and it'd be like, okay, you know, that comes down to the talent that's against them being kind of lesser. But do I expect them to make a run as deep as they have recently in the dead team buff? Probably not. I feel like I see that as a big one-off kind of fluke.
Yeah, I'm not seeing this dead team to honeymoon, like, perfect pair of events, you know, manifesting. I do have problems with this team. Their opening matchup is heroic. That's a loss. I'm sorry. I can't predict it any other way. And I kind of think you're right. We have no real reason to say Golden's a great coach. We don't. We've seen one stint with Godsent, very little else, a very middling time period in between with Eyeballers as a player. Back on the IGL role, and well, if you've ever had the misfortune of watching Eyeballers play, you'll know it's not a resounding endorsement, his period there. So, yeah, no, I do have some difficulty supporting a Saw pick. I don't mind taking the risk on them just because we know what we're going to get from MIBR and Furia, and yeah, it's not pretty. But so at least you're talking about something novel, something different. It is, as you said, a lot of weight on Azuwu, though. I like him, but it's a lot to ask. And the Sejok point it's a player who came in, looked sharp, looked smart for his age, looked relatively like well composed, and you thought, oh, okay, that's why there's some excitement. But it did kind of just seem to wear off. Like, you know, the shine just wore. And towards the end of Endpoint, you're right, it was, this is the kid. Like, this is who I've been sold. Yeah. Like, I felt a bit underwhelmed by the end of it. But hey, he's here. He's on this team. He's replacing Roman, so to be fair, the fragging implications about the same. You don't really have to do much to maintain what Roman was typically producing at big events. So I don't know. I don't love everything about this team, but they still have Muterus, still have Story, who for their scene, for their level of competition, have always been way stronger than they really should be. Like, they're pretty good open IGL duo. It's just always been a question of the rifle play around them.
I think the players they picked up are just weird from wow, they're going international point of view. But I mean, personalities wise, I guess maybe not personalities, play style wise, maybe not necessarily roles, but the way that, you know, Sejok typically likes to play, or the way that, you know, as Azu typically likes to play, I think do feel like solid replacements, you know, for Roman and I guess what is supposed to be like a Ujerks type player. I think the only concern I really have is that, you know, Endpoint's whole model was find a player, build him up, sell him, and put him in positive spots so that they can sell him, because everyone will look at the stats and be like, wow, this guy must be sick. Azu never really fulfilled that role on Endpoint. Like, they were setting him up in much the same ways that they had done previously with, you know, Flames and Heavy God and Nerds, you know, Boros, you know, all these pieces that ended up coming out of the Endpoint system, and Azu just didn't live up to that task. So I want to believe that he can turn a corner, and it was just maybe the Endpoint system falling to pieces in the CS2 transition. But it's hard for me to say. I want to believe. That's all I want to do. I want to believe.
Well then, believe you shall. Okay. We're on to me, aren't we? Yes.
Yeah.
For real this time. I don't know. I'm looking at this. I don't want to go double Chinese. I think there's only so much risk I can take in terms of the teams I want to pick.
Sure.
So I'm going to take NRG. What's left of North American CS plus one cool Danish bro? Like, what's not to love? Right? This is an interesting roster, because we often talk about European player goes abroad, curb stomps everyone, and it either does one of two things. It never really means much. Like, we've seen some players who've gone to like very low level international teams and then just come back. Like, it's not really been that big a deal. But some have come back with like this renewed confidence and this understanding of their own abilities and what they can do on the server, what they can get away with. And it's made them better players overall. Bro's not been across the pond that long. But in that time, he has put up god tier curb stomp type numbers, like a 1.27 rating, 0.8 KPR. Like, he's just doing kind of whatever he wants, opening, clutching. Yeah, it's North American CS. He's having a great time. Part of what allows me to have some belief in this pick, and I'm saying belief, top end 2 and 3 great job, great effort, you know. Have a beer, chill out, you've earned it.
You
that
tried.
kind of that kind of like, almost condescending, but realistically, given what we expect from the fourth best NA team or whatever they are now, would be fairly impressive still. Because I have been, you know, not in love with, but like fairly hyped for a player like Hex T. I've always thought for a rifler he's been above NA standards, just never was on the right project. You know, end up on Evil Geniuses. Need I say any more? They've got an actual IGL, even if he isn't necessarily the most up to meta, most, you know, in the know IGL because of his time away and now his extended period in Tier 2 NA. You know, it's going to be a bit disconnecting. I still think he's a decent leader of men in Nitro, so I think that's another good thing I look for in a team that I think could have a chance of making an upset happen. And sure, I'm not going to pretend I'm a big fan of OC or George. As much as George has been sold to me as an NA talent, I've always seen him as a NA first. When he plays EU, far out of his depth. Oh my god, there's flashbangs? Like, what am I doing? Like, that kind of player. So I don't really have the most faith in the entire roster. I just know that I have a very strong rifle piece who's feeling confident, is, you know, benefiting from this kind of NA buff. I've got an IGL who knows how to lead a team through rough waters. I mean, Liquid for all those years. There's a lot of rough water. And Daps as a coach is always strategically like fairly strong, and so he can have some influence through timeouts. I'm not saying they're going to make it very far, but I think they'll get more wins on the board than Housebets, Mindfreak, and Tyloo, possibly combined. So that's my take on NRG. It is very bro heavy. We're going to call it bro science, I guess. Just believe in bro. But maybe a bit of magic can come through. We never know. We never know. I don't know. Neo, I want you to take an optimistic look. Like, give me your best case scenario for them.
Do you know what? I really don't hate this this NRG lineup. I actually think kind of recent results of them have actually looked quite positive, right? They've obviously been doing relatively decently domestically, right? I think obviously you're spot on that a lot of this leans on the back of bro, but you know, when we look at them domestically, they're beating teams they should be beating, they're losing to, well, M80, so fair enough, right? As a whole, but the rest of it, if you kind of take out that M80 lost in the kind of the Blast Rising event, it's actually just a real string of wins for like quite a long time until we go back to kind of ESL Challenger League, which obviously in North America, same with in Asia, it's back-to-back best of ones rather than best of threes. So I'd say best of threes with a bit of a grain of salt, especially, you know, some of them, like, even look at the most recent one, they were playing against a team called Vagrants. They lost their opening best of one and then won the second best of one or second map 13-2, right? So, like, if that had gone to a third map, you probably do back NRG in that, and then we chalk it up as a win. So, for the most part, I actually have really been enjoying what I've seen from them. I've caught them a little bit in the I Am Dow close quals. I thought they looked pretty good there. I caught their game against M80 and Blast Rising, and sure, picked up a loss, but there was bits to like. I mean, they're great. They were kind of stomped a little bit, but I kind of expected them to, especially in the Inferno. There was moments where you're thinking, all right, there's ideas here that are trying to be formulated. I still, you know, want to like Nitro. I still think he's maybe got, you know, some ideas to bring to the table. But I do think a lot of this is just off the back of bro. And I think, you know, will that help them through this tournament? Probably not. But will it give them chances to succeed against some of these quote-unquote lesser teams? Probably. I doubt they would finish dead last. You know, I could see them obviously beating Housebets and Mindfreak, and I could honestly see them going kind of toe-to-toe with teams like your Tyloos and your Nemigas, maybe even pushing some of these other teams like your LynnVision as the distance. Anywhere above that, probably very unlikely, but can they get a win? Maybe a 2-3 scoreline? Potentially. I think anything more than 2-3 would be kind of outlandish for NRG, but I think with where this team is currently at, bringing bro from overseas, I think they've actually been looking pretty good. So as sort of a bold prediction goes and sort of an underdog, I don't think it's a terrible one comparatively to sort of some of the others. I think these guys have been scaling up quite nicely. I've been quite impressed with the consistency, and I think that's quite a rare thing, especially playing online Counter-Strike. It does also help that you play North America. It's a pretty dog shit region when you look at online CS, but it does help a little bit, right? But I think they've been putting away some of these teams that are in a similar position to them or wanting to sort of overtake NRG, like your bosses and your nouns, for example. You want to be in similar spots, and I think they've actually been doing quite well. So For NRG, I don't hate this underdog pick. I actually think there's bits to like. I think a lot of it comes down to what Bro can do, but he obviously wants to prove himself now back on relative home soil or close to home soil, I guess, being Sweden, not too far from Denmark.
Yeah, not too bad.
NRG strike me as like an amateur team playing in an academy league, and that is what currently North America kind of is just kind of an academy league to filter into liquid M80 complexity, and that's about as much as I could really say on the matter. I mean, NRG to me, I've not watched any other games since they've added Burrow, so I actually don't have any like firm impressions of how well this team will do, and so I won't bore you speculating. So, the players are pretty good. I don't know that they can actually be good together, but individually the players are not terrible, so that's a positive for me.
Yeah, I mean that is it. I was about to introduce you like, now Yumi, give me everything bad about this team. I'll be as pessimistic as possible.
Yeah, I just haven't watched them, unfortunately. I would love to be, but I can't.
Yeah, no, I mean, thankfully I think there's no chance they go 0-3. I hate to keep bashing on the Aussies, but lads, no. I don't believe in you at all.
You hate to see it, right? I think it's the unfortunate thing coming back to sort of how lopsided it feels in a little bit. Is it my turn now, or have you got another one?
It is. You've got one more pick, and that rounds out the show. You have the final pick.
Do I get to choose? Does it have to be an underdog or
it is an underdog. It's all left.
I'm not fucking picking the Aussies. I'm gonna go Tyloo. I can't bring myself to pick, 230 of VRS ranked house bets. I can't do it to myself. I'm gonna go with Tyloo here. Again, I've not caught a lot of Tyloo since the end of last year, where the super team was there. I think post super team, when it was all sort of falling apart, I sort of started losing a lot of faith in Tyloo because, Jam Young wants to go to Valorant. He then trialed in Valorant for a different org and failed, so he came back to Tyloo. It's just like, it's kind of embarrassing. But there's parts to like on this team. I think is probably always the case. I think Jam Young can still put up decent numbers. I think G on the Orb can look very good. I think both Mercury and Mosaic can also put up decent numbers as well. So I don't hate Tyloo by any means, but do I think they're going to do a lot at this tournament? No, probably not. One thing I will say for them is that actually kind of like domestically, they've actually looked pretty good. Again, I was coming kind of ESL Challenge the other day, and they're actually towards that top end, but that's all well and good. But tournaments around that have actually been pretty brutal. Everything where they've been trying to qualify to lands. We're talking about the Blast Rising stuff, the IM Dallas. They're not even picking up any wins, losing to Atox, Rare Atom, LynnVision. And when you, especially kind of like with LynnVision and Rare Atom, it would put it in that sort of sense. That now puts them in that pecking order of being like the third best Chinese team, right? And that's just not ever what you want to see from Tyloo. They're always meant to be the best, right? That was always what they were known as. Tyloo, the best kind of team from China, and for a while, it's just not being the case. And no matter what changes they're making, that's not changing for them. They're still just looking pretty average as a whole. But I think the one kind of piece to like that you can say about Tyloo is that they do have decent individuals who can actually just pop off. Like occasionally Jam Young puts up a really good map and you're like, okay, this is sick. Or same for Mosaic as well, goes super kind of FBL puggy style and then kind of farms a little bit. So they can pop off and maybe pull off an upset somewhere, but do I think it's likely? Probably not. I think, they're going to come into their first game against 3D Max. They're just going to be tactically outmaneuvered, I think, more than anything. It doesn't even have, like, even if they get some of these players online and the firepower is there, they just tactically, I just don't think can take down a side like 3D Max who have so much more depth than them. So I think Tyloo are the best of a bad bunch is sort of what I'll say. Do I have a lot of faith for them? Not really. Do I have to pick them? Sadly. So that's how I ended off.
I mean, look, if you wanted someone out of that group to steal a win, maybe picking the Convicts was the way to go. But hey, you've gone with Tyloo, and they are... I think they're in a not too dissimilar boat to LynnVision for me, like in terms of there is some talent, like objectively sharp shooters. There's always a chance, given a team leaves the door open, they might sneak through. They might be able to hit the shots and just take that win. The problem is BO3s always give the better team a chance to bring it all the way back. Run up the table on the next two maps, and that makes it a bit more difficult. Yumi, you're our resident Asian expert. How do you see Tyloo's chances?
Bring back an actual in-game leader into this team, man. Like,
It'll help.
get X Pro. Hell, I don't even get Advent back. I actually just
No,
want. No.
no.
Listen, I know you're a big Advent hater, and I didn't want him playing it towards the end either. But to be honest, this Tyloo looks worse because there is no strict in-game leaders. I'd rather there be dead weight in the server that randomly, like, once every 70 games has like an incredible Inferno somehow. I would rather that guy than this weird power struggle internally where they, one, don't have a fifth, and two, nobody knows what the fuck they're doing. Like,
Sure.
I miss like seeing Jam Young, Mercury, and Mosea actually have impact on this roster. Instead, everyone's just kind of, oh guys, I'll work a pick. Oh, that didn't work. Okay, let's just sit here for a little bit and see what happens. I hate the way that Tyloo play currently. And it's not always like that, you know, they still try and do executes, they still try and do like things normal teams do, but it just looks so uncoordinated by comparison, and it's just, they're a shell of their former selves because of it, even though the team does have a lot of, I guess, sort of inherent talent. So, yeah, just honestly bring an in-game leader in. God, I don't think Jam Young has what it takes. Westmelon made that transition for LynnVision. Jam Young is not Westmelon. We are fine with that. Move on, and please just get back to something that works.
Yeah.
But yeah, this team sucks. So I have no further comment.
All right. I think we're leaving this on the positive note of no further comment.
I think so, unfortunately.
Damn.
G's also kind of washed.
He is, sadly.
Yeah.
Zach has ended up looking like such a god in that move.
I mean, it's an interesting little project, let's put it that way. You never know what chaos can bring. The power of literal random nonsense.
And it kind of works for some of these Asian teams sometimes. So, you know, I'm not gonna discount them to pick up a win or loss here or there.
This Tyloo core used to be against that, though. They were against the grain.
True.
They were the tactical ones. They brought order to the chaos. Now
they
are
ideas, yeah.
They're just the chaos now as well, and it pisses me off.
Yeah, we would normally do extras, but we are 2 hours deep. I think we'll wrap it up there. Who needs to hear us shit on MIBR and Furia for another half hour?
Or house bets. What a name for a gambling company. You bet in your house.
Oh my god.
Yeah, we all know that's not what they were going for, but it is how it's ended up sounding.
Yeah.
But no, yeah, Mind Freak house bets. Sorry, no one picked you, and we don't have, I don't think, much to add on to.
Yeah.
To
There's
even
not a lot
really
to
create a
justify
section
there,
for.
unfortunately.
Yeah. Oh yeah, Ricky might be there. Cool. Anyway, that's the show. If you made it this far, you're my hero. Leave a like if you enjoyed. Leave a comment telling us your thoughts on any of our picks. You know, who made a blunder? Who shouldn't have picked who? We'll see. We'll find out. The comments, usually the experts, right? They never get it wrong. Sub for more, and remember that members get access to more content, as well as the rights to vote and other stuff that people usually die for. You get it for £2 a month. So we'll see you next time. Goodbye.